Hello and a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Moscow accepts an invitation to the first ever trilateral peace talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia, being held later today in Abu Dhabi.
The families of British soldiers killed in Afghanistan joined politicians in their fury over Trump's claims that NATO troops stayed away from the front line during the war.
The Home Secretary has a plan to slash the number of police forces in England and Wales. She hopes it'll cut waste.
Well, Jackie will join us later on this hour with all the sports news, including an odd joke from the boss of FIFA.
Yeah, we'll tell you about that in a moment. Also, is this one of Britain's biggest hospital scandals? We hear ongoing concerns over the water supply at one Glasgow hospital. Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us. A breakthrough in the now 4-year-long war in Ukraine could be within sight as Ukrainian, Russian and US officials all meet for the first time ever in the UAE today.
Yeah, Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has left the Russian president in Moscow, made a mad dash to the Middle East to confirm today's talks. On his way back from the Swiss ski resort of Davos, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, spoke to journalists and said everyone will have to compromise to get a deal done.
They'll make concessions. Everybody's making concessions to get it done. Europe is going to be a part of it. It's going to be a part of it. Look, it's more for Europe than for me. I mean, I'm doing this more for Europe than for me. I'm doing it to save lives, number one. I'm doing it secondarily for Europe. I'm not doing it so much for the U.S. It doesn't affect us very much.
Well, Donald Trump's final engagement before leaving Davos was with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who Trump insists wants to make a deal for the people of Ukraine.
He said he'd like to make a deal. I mean, you know, there's not much you can say. People know the parameters. It's not like, you know, we're discussing things that have been discussed for 6 or 7 months, and he came and he said he wants to make a deal because I wasn't necessarily sure. I think he should want to make a deal. It's pretty tough. It's really tough on the people of Ukraine, I'll tell you that.
Well, all of this after Volodymyr Zelensky's speech at Davos, which took aim at Europeans for their inaction against Russia and President Putin. Last night, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen responded to Zelensky, saying Europe has sufficiently supported Ukraine during Russia's invasion.
We have been supporting the heroic fight of the Ukrainian people for now 4 years. I think on our side, actions speak louder than words. We are the largest supporter of Ukraine in the last 4 years, more than 193 billion euros. And the European Council has just decided to add to this sum another 90 billion euros for the next 2 years. We know that we will never match the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people. But what we can do is stand by their side, and I think the figures speak for themselves, but also the personal engagement of all of us is speaking for itself.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Sally Lockwood. Morning to you, Sally. This is quite a moment, isn't it? The first trilateral talks are going ahead today in Abu Dhabi. How high would you say hopes are of some kind of breakthrough from them?
Well, it's important, I think, with these talks, as it always is, to keep hopes certainly rather tempered, because, of course, we have been here before. That said, this is a significant moment. As President Zelensky said himself in Davos yesterday, this is the first trilateral meeting between the Ukrainians, the Russians and the American delegation taking place in Abu Dhabi. There is precedent for this. In November, military officials from all three sides were here in talks, although it's not understood whether they were all in the same room at the same time, but certainly the UAE has hosted talks on Ukraine already. But let's see what happens. It's been a very fast-moving situation since that meeting between Donald Trump and President Zelensky in Davos yesterday, and then a very fast decision to move to Moscow and hold that meeting with President Putin. We understand that took place with envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, just before midnight in Moscow. It lasted around 4 hours. And their next stop is here, the United Arab Emirates. It's around a 5-hour flight from Moscow. So if they indeed have arrived already, it will have been in the last few hours. But following that meeting with Vladimir Putin overnight, a Kremlin aide described the talks as constructive and very frank. But it does seem that this issue of territory does remain the major final sticking point, and it is a big one. Take a listen to what Yuri Ushakov, the Kremlin aide on foreign policy, said following that meeting. I'm just going to read you some of what he said. He said, most importantly, during our president's talks with the Americans, it was reiterated that without resolving the territorial issue according to the formula agreed upon in Anchorage, there is no hope of achieving a long-term settlement. He was, of course, referring there to the summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska last August. One other significant thing to mention, though, I spoke to an American source last night who has been advising the American delegation, and he said to me that it's hugely significant that Kirill Budanov, Zelensky's new chief of staff, he was appointed just a few weeks ago in early January, and he will be here at these talks today and tomorrow in Abu Dhabi. And this source said to me that Budanov is the only member of Zelensky's office that they take really seriously, that the US military and the US intelligence respects him. America loves Budanov, is what he said to me. He said it's hugely positive that he will be here, but he said that really diplomacy doesn't match the reality of what happens on the ground in Ukraine at the moment. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Indeed, Sally, a really interesting one to watch. Thanks very much indeed. And as Sally was saying, the fact that there are the three parties attending these talks is a step forward. And Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, of course, pretty optimistic, saying there was just one issue to resolve. But when it's a big issue like that of territory, so many questions about whether they can get some kind of breakthrough. Yeah,
they said they're into the final mile of this, but that final mile is always the most difficult mile. And if it's over territory, if it's over territory that Ukraine has had to bleed and has lost, and remember, the Russians, as part of their peace plan, wanted actually territory that they hadn't even taken militarily yet. The Ukrainians to concede that, which was, of course, a hard, firm red line from the Ukrainians. If that is the area in which they're negotiating over, you can see why it's still not being resolved, because the Ukrainians, after nearly 4 years of war, will not be willing in any way to give up territory that they haven't yet lost. And President Zelensky, of course, has said that they will put any ceasefire deal that is put in place to referendum anyway. So then the Ukrainian people have to be the ones to decide whether or not they'll accept this deal. So you can see quite a high bar for them to get somewhere, but there is optimism, of course. It's significant. We shouldn't underplay the fact that now these three sides are all together in Abu Dhabi at quite a high level, as Sally points out, discussing it. So that is a significant step. We'll see what comes out of it over the next couple of days.
Absolutely, plenty of coverage here, of course, on all of that. But in the meantime, let's just move on to another international issue, and all comments, at least, made by Donald Trump about one. He's been criticised for claiming that NATO troops stayed a little off the front lines in Afghanistan. There's been quite a backlash in the UK to that. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test. And I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
I mean, it's just flat wrong, the idea that they never needed... The only time Article 5 has ever been invoked in the history of the NATO alliance was after the United States was attacked on September the 11th. The US asked for allies to come to their aid, and allies came to their aid. 19 non-US nations, NATO nations, sent soldiers that died in Afghanistan, some 850, some 450 British soldiers at least died. The soldiers from the nation per capita who died in the highest number is Danes. Danes went to help the US in that war in Afghanistan. So for the president to suggest that no one had come to their aid is just not true.
Yeah, and we'll get plenty of reaction through the morning to this. A lot of people very unhappy about those comments.
Yeah, we certainly will. Look, well, let's put actually some of that to the government now, because I'm pleased to say we're joined now by the Health Minister, Mr Stephen Kinnock, for his thoughts on it. Stephen Kinnock, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you very much. And I know you're in a hospital. We're going to come to the cancer plan later, I assure you, because, of course, that's a really important moment, the announcement that you've got there. But I want to pick up on what we've heard from Donald Trump overnight. I mean, what is your message to the President of the United States, who has once again disparaged the record of those coalition troops who fought and died in Afghanistan?
Well, good morning, and it just doesn't really add up, what he said, because the fact of the matter is the only time that Article 5 has been invoked was to go to the aid of the United States after 9/11, and many British soldiers and many soldiers from other European NATO allies gave their lives in support of American missions, American-led missions in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. I am incredibly proud of our armed forces. They have put their lives on the line for our country. They are the definition of honour and valour and patriotism. And I think anybody who seeks to criticise what they have done and the sacrifices that they make is plainly wrong. And I think the reaction to President Trump's comments are very clear from right across the political spectrum, and I think the British public feels very strongly about the need to defend our armed forces and to support them in the incredibly important work that they do in the dangerous and turbulent world in which we live.
I mean, he's completely trashed their legacy, hasn't he? I mean, the mother of the youngest person to die fighting in Afghanistan said that President Trump lacks compassion. I mean, she's right, isn't she?
President Trump's comments are deeply disappointing. There is no other way to say that. I don't know really why he said them. I don't think there's any basis for him to make those comments. It's clear that the mother of that brave soldier is absolutely right when she talks about the sacrifice that her child, the child that she loved so much, made in the interests of our country, in the interests of our own national security. And there's a long history of the British Armed Forces standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States. We will always stand up for the values that we cherish: democracy, freedom, liberty to push back against dictators and anybody else that seeks to undermine our values and our way of life. And NATO is at the heart of that alliance. NATO, of course, it was a Labour government that signed us up to NATO shortly after the Second World War. So let's be clear, that alliance is absolutely vital. It's the most successful international security alliance in the history of the world. The European partners in that alliance play a vital role, including the United Kingdom. The United States plays a vital role as well. So let's just stay focused on that, not worry too much about some of the noises that you hear around the issues that we've had in the last few weeks and months, and instead get back to the core values of what it is that makes NATO the successful and strong alliance that it is.
Thank you for that, Minister. Last one on global affairs, if you'll indulge me, please. It's about Greenland, as you kind of have alluded to there at the end of your answer. Now, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Mr Kinnock, but some viewers may not know that your wife is the former Prime Minister of Denmark. She said to our Beth Rigby just a week or so ago that Denmark, Greenland were being bullied by what Trump was saying about wanting to annex the island. We're now at a point where some deal seems to have been reached. The Greenland Prime Minister has said he's not sure what the deal is. Are you clear at this point what the deal is? The Prime Minister says he's happy with where we're going forward, but what have we agreed to?
Well, it's very early days in terms of the detail of that deal, and we need to wait and see exactly how it gets fleshed out. What is absolutely clear, both my wife Helle and, of course, the current Danish Prime Minister who visited the UK yesterday, they're so grateful to the role that our Prime Minister Keir Starmer has played, leading the diplomatic effort, being calm, robust, determined, focused to get President Trump into a place which is far better and more sensible than what it was just a few days ago. And I think that is testament to the strength of the European partnerships and alliances that we have. This is about Europe and NATO coming together and standing up for sovereignty, standing up for the principles that ensure that we protect the integrity of the NATO alliance. And I think, obviously, Greenland as a part of the Kingdom of Denmark is a very important part of that. We want more American participation in Arctic security. There's a treaty that's existed since 1951 between Denmark and the United States that enables the United States to play the most active role that it wants to play. And so what I hope now is we will have a framework for making that happen, with the partners and allies acting as a kind of Arctic sentry to protect those seaways and to push back against threats from the likes of Russia that are clearly playing a more and more aggressive role in terms of global security.
All right, Minister, let's talk about the reason that you're in a hospital in your shirt sleeves today, because there's an announcement for there to be more cancer care for coastal and rural parts of the country to end the postcode lottery. Is there more money available to make sure that this provision can be expanded across the country?
Well, for far too long, the quality of the treatment and the speed of diagnosis when it comes to cancer has depended too much on where you live in the country. The cancer plan that we will be publishing very soon will address that, and it will end that postcode lottery. We want to ensure that if you live in rural or coastal areas, or perhaps areas that are more deprived, you've got the access, first of all, to the technology. So at the moment, the way that the healthcare tech is approved is far too fragmented across the different trusts. We're bringing NICE in now for the first time ever to give national approval to care tech, and the NHS must then roll that tech out right across every trust in the country. So at the moment, that's too concentrated in cities. We need to get it out into rural and coastal areas. And ditto on training places. The training places are too concentrated in certain parts of the country. We need to roll those out. So we're making more training places available in the rural and coastal and more deprived areas of the country. This is about redeploying the funding and the training places to target them more where they need to be. We're working with the Royal Colleges and the British Medical Association on that, and more details of that will be published when we publish our cancer plan very soon.
I believe that's expected on World Cancer Day, which is the 4th of February, so we look forward to reading that when it is published. Stephen Kinnock, thanks very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Quite interesting from the Minister there, certainly about Donald Trump's comments, saying that he just can't understand why Mr Trump would have said that, because it's just patently not true that NATO forces did not help the US when they needed it.
Yeah, he said, I'm incredibly proud of our armed forces. They've put their lives on the line for our country. They're the definition of honour and valour and patriotism. So, yeah, pretty critical there, Stephen Kinnock, of those comments. We're going to stick with UK politics now. The Home Secretary is planning to drastically cut the number of police forces in England and Wales. Yeah,
right now they're at 43, and with the reforms planned, Shabana Mahmood's hoping to merge certain aspects of them, especially back office functions, in order to cut down on bureaucracy. Yeah, the idea is that it'll free up more resources to support frontline policing. So let's find out a little bit more. Alex Rogers has joined us. Morning to you, Alex. How are you doing? So essentially, what is the Home Secretary trying to do here?
I think what she's trying to do is free up more police time. There's a sense that the system at the moment is too complicated, there's too many forces, and that by consolidating them and merging those back office functions, you get police officers kind of out of the office doing paperwork and crime reporting and back onto the streets. We know that things like phone theft and antisocial behaviour, shoplifting, these are the things that really concern people. And I think there's a feeling in government that there's been police forces haven't been able to tackle them in the way that they should be able to.
And Alex, while we've got you, there's more rumours swirling about the King of the North, Andy Burnham, about to make a comeback towards Westminster. There's now potentially a space, there's a by-election going to be coming. Just take us through where we are and whether or not it's likely he may well come back.
It's still very uncertain, his route back into number 10. Yes, there's a by-election. He could stand in that, but that's only if the Labour's ruling body, the National Executive Committee, allows him to. And at the moment, that body is stacked with Starmer allies. So really, it's down to them. They have the final say whether he decides to run. And there's also a feeling that he's the Mayor of Greater Manchester, that he shouldn't be allowed necessarily to vacate that position. That could be very tricky for Labour if he does and allow reform in. So it's still very up in the air for him.
Yeah, and also the question of whether or not that seat would be a guaranteed win for Labour as well.
Exactly. I mean, Reform have a good chance there. If the Greens stand as well there, they could split the Labour vote and allow Reform in. So it's very tricky for Keir Starmer either way. You know, he might not necessarily want Andy Burnham to come in because of the threat that he poses to his leadership, but blocking him also maybe dents his authority quite significantly.
Yeah, one to watch. Alex, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Alex. Now, a doctor working at a hospital that's become embroiled in a water contamination scandal has told Sky News that patients could still be alive if her concerns had been listened to.
Yeah, Glasgow's super hospital has been hit by crisis since it opened a decade ago, with some families accusing the NHS of a cover-up to conceal infections and deaths that may be linked to the water supply.
A public inquiry wraps up today, and our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies has been examining the impacts on patients, the public and staff.
It doesn't get much bigger than this. One of Europe's largest. Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital had a near £1 billion price tag and got the royal treatment from day one. Opened by the late Queen in 2015, all was not as it seemed behind the scenes.
I was the infection control doctor on site when the building opened, and I immediately had concerns about the validation of the building and what we'd actually been provided. Dr. Christine Peters still works there, a consultant microbiologist turned whistleblower. What sort of response were you getting? It was a combination of being ignored, being, I would say, intimidated and mocked. And we now know that Dr. Peters' concerns were well-founded. An inspection report carried out just days before this place opened in 2015 found high risks to the water supply. Molly Cudahy was 15 when she was diagnosed with cancer. The schoolgirl later contracted infections at the hospital and gave evidence to a public inquiry examining the scandal.
We were told it was an environmental bug, so water or air or whatever.
That was in 2021. She died last year, aged 23.
It cost Molly her life. It cost her life, and the bacterial infection that Molly had such a debilitating impact on her quality of life. She was just the most remarkable girl. She was remarkable in so many ways. She could communicate on so many levels. As Molly's life was cut short because of the failings, the corporate failings within an institution that was there to protect her.
Police have declared the NHS in Glasgow a suspect in a corporate homicide investigation. That is ongoing. Paige ended up in a cancer ward aged 2, a devastating leukemia diagnosis made worse by an infection. She's now 10 and her mum says she's still living with the consequences.
As a parent, when you get the news that your child has cancer, you automatically think, my kid is going to die. Then on top of that, remember, we were only about 3 months into treatment, for them to come and say to us that, you know, now she's got a life-threatening infection on top of cancer. As a parent, you think your kid isn't going to pull through this. They had so many people coming forward, whistleblowers coming forward, you know, they had reports. Why didn't they act on it?
And the result of that is what?
Children died. Our children were sick.
For so many years, NHS bosses here had denied there was any link between water contamination and a raft of infections among child cancer patients. But a dramatic and unexpected U-turn in recent days, confirming that in some cases there possibly is now a link between conditions at this place and those infections. And they insist the hospital is now safe and major improvements have been made.
And NHS GGC offers a full and unreserved apology for the distress and trauma experienced by patients and families during this time.
Clearly, every day, thousands of patients are going to that hospital, and my colleagues in the hospital are brilliant. Do we have the evidence to show us that the hospital is safe today? From my personal point of view, I don't have the evidence that satisfies me, but I'm not the one who has to be satisfied.
Are you saying that you're not satisfied that
No.
that building is safe?
I think in terms of specific details, I don't have the details to say one way or the other. And after 10 years, that's not acceptable.
Questions remain, confidence clearly eroded in one of the biggest hospital scandals this country has ever seen. Conor Gillis, Sky News in Glasgow.
Right, that's a report from Conor Gillis there. You can see more of that on our website, of course. Now, hopefully you're watching this having had a good night's sleep. I don't think I did. You can probably tell I'm a little bit under the weather. So apologies for my voice. I've had the lurgy for the past few days. But did you get a good night's sleep?
Oh, it wasn't a very long sleep.
It wasn't very long. Now, if you didn't sleep well, you're not alone. We're going to talk about the rise in cases of insomnia. That's coming up next after this short break. thanks for being with us. Let's take you through our headlines so far this morning. And a breakthrough in the now 4-year war in Ukraine could be within sight, many hope, as Ukrainian, Russian and US officials meet in the UAE for the first time today. Ukrainians are currently enjoying their 4th winter of Russia's invasion.
The Home Secretary is planning to drastically cut the number of police forces in England and Wales. Shabana Mahmood will outline plans next week which could streamline the current model of 43 separate constabularies.
And a doctor working at a hospital embroiled in a water contamination scandal has told Sky News that patients could still be alive if her concerns had been listened to. A public inquiry into the scandal will wrap up today.
Now, we're asking whether you had a good night's sleep or not.
No.
Me neither, really. You may have found yourself tossing and turning in the early hours, and if you have been struggling with your sleep recently, you are not alone. The NHS has recorded a rise of more than 10,000 cases from 2020 to 2024. So let's talk about sleep and sleep medicine. And adult ADHD specialist Dr. Bruna Sarnada-Vukadinovic is here with us. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. So what do you make of this rise in the diagnosis of insomnia? Are more and more of us struggling to sleep?
So I think the awareness of us, the awareness of how important insomnia is and the impact on our day-to-day life is what is on the rise. Especially we had seen both in the NHS and the private psychiatry clinic where I'm the clinical director during COVID. So insomnia is on the rise, but I would say primarily the awareness about insomnia and the impacts on our day-to-day functioning.
And does that awareness of insomnia kind of compound the insomnia? Because I know that when I can't sleep and I'm thinking about not being able to sleep, it makes it harder for me to sleep.
You're absolutely right. So the worrying about not being able to fall asleep or to wake up and not being able to function the next day, it's what makes insomnia even worse. And one of the main tips that we like to give both in the NHS and my private work is if you're worrying in your bed, if you're tossing and turning, the best thing is to get out of your bedroom even, and spend that time somewhere else. And only when you feel relaxed, sleepy again, to go back to your bedroom.
But don't go downstairs and start scrolling your phone. Just go.
No.
If possible not.
We're all making notes of your sleep tips, by the way. We're very interested in this subject. People who get up incredibly early. But what is the main reason that people have sleep problems, would you say?
So that's a very important question. And I think when people think about sleep disorders, insomnia is just the tip of the iceberg. We all think, okay, I struggle to fall asleep, I struggle to maintain sleep, it must be insomnia. But what actually is the most important thing is a comprehensive diagnostic assessment to see, is it just insomnia or is it maybe an underlying sleep conditions? We are familiar with sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome. It can be all different kinds of parasomnia, sleepwalking, dream enactment. It can be a condition called circadian rhythm disorder, which is basically where our biological clock that controls when we feel sleepy and when we feel awake is misaligned with the outside world. So it can be so many different sleep conditions that are actually underlying and unrecognized, and having a proper comprehensive diagnostic assessment is usually the first step to success and to good treatment. And if you think you have just insomnia, follow all the sleep hygiene rules, and you're still struggling, that's often for us the cue, okay, something else is maybe going on.
And Doctor, maybe we should cover our ears for this next bit, but like, what are the dangers of people who don't get enough sleep?
So thank you for this question, and I think that's the most important maybe message for our viewers, for our patients, is there is a big difference between sleep deprivation and insomnia. Insomnia is inability to fall asleep even though you have a good opportunity to sleep. Sleep deprivation is you can sleep, but you don't have the opportunity. For example, young mothers, that would be a good example. And insomnia, when you compare insomnia and sleep deprivation is far more dangerous. So I would just like to take that worry out of people and say, if you have a bad night or if you have a couple of consecutive bad nights, try not to worry. The consequences are not as awful as we can see in media and social media. Because like you said at the beginning, if we start worrying, our sleep will just run away further and further from us.
Don't worry, Anna.
Yeah, no, I'm going to try not to worry. And one other thing about ADHD, because I know you're a specialist in ADHD, and we've seen a rise in diagnoses. So is that something that can be related to sleep?
Absolutely. So that is also something that we often see at private psychiatry clinic. ADHD and sleep are interconnected, and if you treat just ADHD or just sleep, it's just going to lead to limited success. So we are specialists in both conditions, and the first thing is to do, like I said, a comprehensive diagnostic assessment, see is it insomnia that a person with ADHD has, or is it circadian rhythm disorder? And one important thing to say, 1/3 of people with ADHD actually do have circadian rhythm disorder and not insomnia. And no matter how much sleep hygiene they do, it's not a lack of discipline or motivation. It's why they're struggling. It's actually an underlying unrecognized sleep condition. It's their biology.
Really interesting. Dr. Brun, thanks so much for coming in to tell us all about it. We
Thank
are
you for
fascinated
having
by
me.
sleep
thank
here.
you, Doctor. Leave your card, 'cause I've got a friend who might want to talk to you about some
I will
advice
do
on how
that.
to sleep better. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Doctor.
Thank you.
Now, there's a new plan from the government which hopes to make it easier for those living in rural and coastal communities to see a cancer specialist.
Yeah, that's what we were talking to Stephen Kinnock about just a little while ago. The changes aim to end the postcode lottery by making the system fairer for patients all across the country.
Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has been taking a look.
Devastating. It was incredibly... It hurt physically, mentally, the journey, the unknown, the feel of not being in control.
Michelle broke down and cried when she was told she had lung cancer. In that moment, her life changed forever. The news brought fear and uncertainty. Her cancer journey has been difficult, beset with delays and complications.
It's both actually mentally and physically demanding. Mainly, the physical is obvious. I'm not able to breathe as much as I was. But mentally, it's really demanding. I'm unable to really cook for myself. And all the things that I used to take for granted are really difficult now.
The UK has some of the worst cancer survival rates compared to other high-income countries. And that's because of later diagnosis, slower access to treatment, and a failure to recruit specialist staff. All issues that must be addressed with more investment.
What we need is more bodies on the ground. We need more people, we need more clinical staff, and I think the government may need to look at pay deals. Pay is particularly poor, especially for the nursing side of things. Increased training, better facilities locally for the local community, because travelling to various large hospitals can be very difficult. So I think a lot of it is money, really, increasing funding.
The government's delayed cancer plan is finally about to be published. All the details haven't been announced, but it has identified key areas for urgent improvements, including rural and coastal community care.
We know that your chances of developing cancer and of surviving cancer vary according to where you live. And we need to increase the number of specialists that we have available, and we need to particularly target those to the areas where we have the biggest problems.
Michelle is undergoing a grueling regime of chemotherapy and radiography. That in itself has a devastating impact on her body. But delays to her treatment cause added stress.
When you're waiting for a diagnosis, a day feels like a year, and waiting and waiting. There was some delays with my treatment because, unfortunately, they didn't have enough beds.
A national plan will come too late for Michelle, but it could help thousands of others whose lives will also be shattered by this killer disease. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Now, the app TikTok has sealed a deal to create a new American organisation separate from its China-based operations.
Yes, the deal hands over the company's American division to investors backed by Donald Trump. So let's find out more. Molly's here to give us the details. And Donald Trump wasn't happy about the idea of TikTok running in the US, given its Chinese ownership, was he? So what is this solution that's been hatched?
Essentially, it's to appease him, I think, in a sense. It's to appease Donald Trump and various, actually, governments that have been worried about that for a few years. It's essentially a deal that's been struck to avoid TikTok being banned in America. We saw, didn't we, at the beginning of last year, it went completely dark for 14 hours, which is a long time in social media land, isn't it? But for years, though, it's been hanging over some 150 million users in America. Various governments, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, have expressed concern concerns about national security, with fears that, as you say, the Chinese-owned platform could share user data with the Chinese government. The Chinese authorities could then, in turn, influence, perhaps manipulate what users see in terms of their interface and the algorithm, the content that algorithm feeds them. Claims, of course, which have been denied by TikTok over the years. So now we've got this deal to give basically US investors more control over the American version of TikTok. So what they've done is they sold the majority stake, about 80% of the platform in America, to US investors, including Oracle, the US software giant, which is co-founded by a man called Larry Ellison, a big Trump supporter. ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, will still own about a 20% share in the US operations. Look, there are still lots of unknowns about what will change kind of in practice. TikTok overnight said in a statement that US user data will now be operated and stored inside the US cloud environment. So that's quite a big deal. It means that Chinese engineers perhaps won't have that control. And also they said that it will retrain and update the content algorithm based on US data. So that could mean that actually what we see over here on TikTok could look quite different to what US users see in terms of the content and the algorithm and what they're fed. So how happy they'll be about it in the long term, well, we'll wait and see. But for now, Donald Trump will tout this as a big win, and certainly it's a sign that Washington and Beijing can perhaps agree on quite a contentious issue.
Yeah, Molly, thank you. That's really interesting. And also really interesting, given that lots of countries are concerned about the security implications, whether they'll push for sort of similar deals in their own countries. Who knows?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. All right, let's talk Oscars now. And before we talk about all those US movies, one of our own has got a nomination.
Yeah, that's right. This is a documentary from our in-house documentary unit, Full Story Films. It's called Children No More.
Yeah, it's been nominated in the short documentary category, and it's all about people in Israel who were regularly, I think, weekly, if not daily, holding up protests and signs and demonstrations to mark the children who'd been killed in Gaza as a result of the war there over those couple of years.
They hold these silent vigils, and the film is all about the interactions that prompts from people inside the country. Yeah. So I haven't seen it, but it sounds like
it's very good.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the Oscar nominations, and we're going to break down the biggest surprises, the biggest snubs, also the biggest winners, with host of Girls on Film podcast, Anna Smith. So welcome to you. Nice to see you, Anna.
Good to see you.
So, yeah, we got the full list, and there's one kind of winner from all of this. I mean, extraordinary. Sinners, the film Sinners, has cut 60 nominations. That's huge, isn't it?
This is a record, OK? So previous to that, the most nominations that any one film has got in the Oscars is 14, and only 3 films have achieved that. So this is very exciting. Yes, that's one of them. Well done.
I had no idea about the other ones.
Yes.
All About Eve.
All About Eve and La La Land, yes. So this is very exciting, 16 nominations, and I think this is particularly significant because this is a horror movie, so that is also very unusual. I think only one horror movie's won Best Picture, and that's Silence of the Lambs. And, you know, it's a very complex film. It blends lots of genres. It's kind of Western horror period. There's a lot about racial tension. It's quite meaty. It's exciting. It's a big hit with audiences as well as voters. And I think it's obviously got some really interesting original songs as well, which is one of the reasons it's scored so many nominations.
So you think it's justified? Do you think it's a good thing that it's got so many?
I think it's great, and I think it's progressive, and it shows that the Academy is broadening its horizons a little bit, yes.
Yeah, and the director, Ryan Coogler, of course, I think it's the second time he's been nominated for the Best Picture. He got a nom for Black Panther as well. It's a huge moment for him as a black film director.
Definitely. And, you know, several years ago, of course, the Academy came under scrutiny with the Oscars so white sort of complaints. So I think the fact that we're now seeing more films like this at the centre of the story is really important.
Yes. It's a good picture as well. I saw it over...
Oh, did you? Yeah.
It's really good. It's really, really good.
So let's talk about its competition, though. One Battle After Another, Marty Supreme, Hamnet, they all clocked up a fair few nods themselves, didn't they?
They did. 13 for One Battle After Another. Paul Thomas Anderson is very much in the frame for this film. And you've got sort of Leonardo DiCaprio. This has scored nominations for many of its actors. And it remains a very strong contender, I think. It's a little bit early to be saying what will win because, as we saw with Anora last year, anything can change at the last minute. But I think this one could go all the way and will definitely not go home empty-handed. You know, it could actually be the biggest winner of the night because the one with the biggest nominations isn't always the biggest winner.
No, but we saw Leonardo DiCaprio there, and there he is again. on our screens, but he's probably, it's the fiercest competition for Best Actor between him and Timothée Chalamet.
That's right, Timothée Chalamet. And it's interesting because a lot of people make comparisons in some ways between Timothy and Leonardo. You know, they both sort of started quite young, sort of pin-ups, very popular with the younger generation, but also great actors, you know, very meaty, interesting performances. And it's very much between those two. I actually think Timothy could take it at this stage because there's a huge buzz for his turn in Marty Supreme as this kind of very determined, almost psychopathic kind of turns-table champion. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, not that I've seen this one. I've seen one battle, and I thought that was excellent too, and Leo's performance, and that's fantastic. I think last time we spoke, actually, you were about to go and see Marty Supreme, weren't you? Or
I think it was me.
Oh, you just didn't see it. And what did you think of it?
Well, you probably seen it.
I had seen it. But what did you think of Marty Supreme?
I really enjoyed it, and Timothée Chalamet is absolutely brilliant. It's exhausting. I found it kind of really full on. That the pace doesn't let up, but it's quite exciting. It is good.
It's not one of my favourite films of awards season because I found it a bit cold-hearted, but it's certainly entertaining and diverting, and I think it's very impressive filmmaking.
Its character is not always sympathetic, is it? So, any surprises, any snubs from this list?
Well, I was happily surprised to see Kate Hudson nominated for Song Sung Blue because I think she was slightly on the edge of getting a nomination there, and I think she's wonderful in this film, and it's a really transformative performance for her. I was also disappointed not to see anything for Wicked for Good. Very interesting that it did so well, 10 nominations last time for the first film, and then nothing, went home empty-handed in the nominations yesterday.
But there's no expectation that just the sequel gets it just because. I mean, is the second one that...
Not just because, but I think, you know, the craft is still exceptional, I think, but there may be a bit of ennui that people have, you know, they've seen it now.
OK. Sorry, you go.
I was only going to be a bit parochial about the Brits, because we always do. I mean, is it a good list of nominations for the Brits?
Well, I mean, Hamlet, it was filmed in Britain, and there's a lot of Brits who perform in that, and the casting director, and also, of course, Irish. We have Jessie Buckley nominated as lead for Hamlet. So,
and a favourite?
Yeah.
Is she? She's definitely
up there. She's absolutely the favourite, yeah.
OK, but is there some disquiet that Paul Mescal didn't get a nod? I heard some of that reporting. I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen the film, so you can tell us.
He's very good in it, but I think it is Jessie's show, so I'm not entirely surprised.
Okay. It's more of a small role, his, I guess, isn't it? Anna, lovely to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Looking forward... When is it, the Oscars?
15th of March.
15th of March. See you then, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. All right, let's take a look at the day's weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, it'll turn colder over the weekend, but the unsettled theme looks to continue with localised flooding and disruption in the northeast and southwest today. The Portuguese-named storm Ingrid will take rain across southern Britain and the south of Ireland this morning, turning showery for some later. Further north, it'll be drier overall, with any early fog lifting, but eastern Scotland will have outbreaks of rain and hill snow, and it'll turn windier with coastal gales in the northeast. The afternoon is going to bring some further showers or longer spells of rain.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Pleased to see we've been joined by Jackie. Hey, Jackie.
Good morning.
To you.
Yeah.
What's coming up?
We're going to hear from Gianni Infantino being really, really cheeky after the break. Some would say rude.
I think a little bit.
A little bit rude. Also, we'll bring you the very latest after last night's games in the Europa League. We'll show you how Villa and Forest got on. Bit of a mixed night for both clubs. We'll show you the goals and the misses.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. there's a dash to safety, as Russian drones will be trying to find this position. We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming. I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment. We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful.
With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real. Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans. The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Well, Jackie is with us to go through some of those goals from last night. I told you, I'm already feeling under the weather, so don't tell me what happened when Forest played Braga.
You know what happened at Forest. Somebody could say, and nobody ever would, let's look at the highlights of what happened last night. But honestly, the first half, there were no highlights in this match, Braga against Forest. It was the dullest of the dullest of the dull matches in Dullsville. Nobody watching. It was raining. The Forest fans were booing their own team.
They didn't create much.
And nothing really was created. There was a bit of action in the second half, and it was absolutely disastrous for Forest.
You are delighted by this.
I stayed up to watch it. You couldn't quite believe what you were seeing. It was an absolute catastrophe in the space of 54 seconds. So let's have a look. In the 53rd minute, Forest won a penalty. Morgan Gibbs-White took it. It was saved. It was a bad penalty. 54 seconds later, this happened down the other end. Bryony scored an own goal. Braga had no shots on target in the whole match, and that was enough for a win. And there was a red card at the end for Elliot Anderson for dissent. So all in all, a holy trinity of disasters.
Paul Kamali, he's not been well, and now this.
After that, yeah, it was disastrous.
I'm very sorry. Are you a slight Villa fan? Are you a slight Villa fan?
I'm happy to see them doing quite well. Unai Emery getting them playing very well at the moment, right? 20
wins in something like the last 25 matches for them. And, you know, Unai Emery is so good in this competition in the Europa League. He's won it 4 times with different clubs, and that is a record. And I'm sure he must have half an eye on winning it with Villa. Let's have a look at what happened to them last night. It was much better for Aston Villa. They qualified for the last 16 with a game to spare. Jadon Sancho's first goal for the club was enough for victory over Fenerbahce in Turkey. It was Unai Emery's 100th game in this competition. But he did have to play down afterwards this kind of confrontation with Yuri Tielemans when he substituted him. And there was a push, there was shouting. It was all played down afterwards. But it is very interesting that happened. Everyone's talking about it.
He called him his son, and they've all got over it. Apparently.
Yeah, they hugged, and apparently...
I think he was coming off the pitch too quickly or something, the reporting is. I mean, who knows? But, like, it's his boss.
Who knows what was going through?
They'll be fine.
They were winning anyway. Yeah. Now, who's seen Gianni Infantino on social media having a little bit of a pop?
Yeah.
So he's at Davos at the Economic World Forum, and he was asked about to defend, you know, the World Cup in the USA. There's a lot of problems with visas for some of the countries who've qualified. Also, ticket prices. The cheapest price for a final ticket is over £3,000. The ticket prices for the group matches are 3 times what they were in Qatar. And he was defending the ticket prices, saying, well, you know, there was lots of criticism of Qatar, but before that World Cup, lots of criticism, and look how well that turned out. But in that process, he ended up criticising, sort of, British fans. Have a look.
We had virtually no incidents. For the first time in history, also, no Brit was arrested during a World Cup. Imagine, this is something really, really special.
Ha ha ha.
Hilarious.
Ha ha, hilarious. No Brits arrested.
Fans group saying less of the cheap jokes. Give cheap tickets instead.
The Football Support Association said, while we have Mr Infantino's attention, we'd like to point out we'd rather than making cheap jokes about our fans, he should concentrate on making cheap tickets.
Right.
Now, yesterday it was one of the days where the British team for the Olympics collect their kit. I raced down to Bath, caught up with some of the team, saw them trying on. I mean, that's when it gets really brought home to you that you are going to Olympics, when they give you your sort of walking on outfit.
And it's really close now.
And it's 2 weeks today that it starts. You might have seen these pictures already. I thought they were really lovely. Princess Kate, Prince William, learning curling with the chap on his right is Bruce Moat. He is the skip of Team GB's curling team for the Olympics. They are the world #1 ranked team. They are absolute favourites for gold. But look how good they are. Like, I mean, this whole thing.
What's that support business she's got in her?
Well, I think that's the sort of falling over. But
is that allowed? Is that regulation equipment?
I'm not sure on curling's regulation equipment.
The whole thing could have gone really badly wrong. I
know.
That is ice. You're sliding on it.
It's
you're
pretty game of
trying
them,
to
isn't it?
cut.
They're both pretty sporty.
Very
game
game
of them.
of
Volleyball and stuff, and I think Kate could
they
play
are
sport a lot
not
as well.
going.
Yeah, they're very sporty, aren't they?
That's
I
quite
would
good.
say that
Please
normally when you watch curling, you think, oh my God, they make it look so easy. This makes you realise that it's not. I mean, they're doing a good job, but
it really
balancing, concentrating.
Give it a push, there it goes. Well,
it's good. It's really good.
Dread to think what I'd be like. Stay with us. Top stories coming on next.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started. Hello, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Moscow accepts an invitation to the first ever trilateral peace talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia, being held later today in Abu Dhabi.
The families of British soldiers killed in Afghanistan join the political fury over Donald Trump's claims that NATO troops stayed away from the front line during the war.
The Home Secretary has a plan to slash the number of police forces in England and Wales. She hopes it'll cut waste.
Well, Jackie will join us later on this hour with all the sports news, including an odd joke from the bosses of FIFA.
Yeah, more on that in a moment. Plus, is this one of Britain's biggest hospital scandals? We hear ongoing concerns over the water supply at one Glasgow hospital.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for being with us. Now, Russia has said yes to an invitation to join the first three-way peace talks with Ukraine and the United States.
Yeah, and there's no delay. Those talks are happening in Abu Dhabi later today. And it follows a mad dash by Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who met with Putin at the Kremlin last night to confirm today's talks. Well, the US president spoke to journalists on his way back from Davos, saying everyone will have to compromise to get a deal done.
They'll make concessions. Everybody's making concessions to get it done. Europe is going to be a part of it. It's going to be a part of it. Look, it's more for Europe than for me. I mean, I'm doing this more for Europe than for me. I'm doing it to save lives, number one. I'm doing it secondarily for Europe. I'm not doing it so much for the... It doesn't affect us very much.
Well, Donald Trump's final engagement before leaving the World Economic Forum at Davos was with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who Trump insists wants to make a deal.
He said he'd like to make a deal. I mean, you know, there's not much you can say. People know the parameters. It's not like, you know, we're discussing things that have been discussed for 6 or 7 months, and he came and he said he wants to make a deal because I wasn't necessarily sure. I think he should want to make a deal. It's pretty tough. It's really tough on the people of Ukraine, I'll tell you that.
Well, this all follows Volodymyr Zelensky's speech in Davos, which surprisingly took aim at Europe for their inaction against Russia and its President Vladimir Putin. Well, late last night, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen responded to Zelensky's claims, saying that Europe has sufficiently supported Ukraine in the war.
We have been supporting the heroic fight of the Ukrainian people for now 4 years. I think on our side, actions speak louder than words. We are the largest supporter of Ukraine in the last 4 years, more than 193 billion euros. And the European Council has just decided to add to this sum another 90 billion euros for the next 2 years. We know that we will never match the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people. But what we can do is stand by their side, and I think the figures speak for themselves, but also the personal engagement of all of us is speaking for itself.
Well, let's go to the Ukrainian capital now, Kyiv, and bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. Deb, morning to you. Thank you for being with us. So, look, these talks getting underway in Abu Dhabi. What's the sense there in Kyiv as to what can be achieved?
Well, there isn't a huge amount of optimism that there's going to be a sudden breakthrough, simply because that last sticking point is the biggest point of all, the biggest obstacle. It's all about the land, the territory. Russia wants to take the whole of the Donbass, that region, Donetsk and Luhansk in the east of the country. Yes, it already controls about 80% of that land after almost 4 full years of its full-scale war, and actually dating back to 2014 when Russia first invaded Ukraine, seizing Crimea, but the Ukrainians still holding on to a section of that area. They have fought and died. It is a red line made in blood, and it is very, very unclear how the two sides are going to be able to reach some kind of compromise. But it's really important to stress just how extraordinary the meeting is going to be today in the UAE, when you have actually senior Ukrainian and Russians officials sitting across the table from each other, sworn enemies. One of the Ukrainian representatives is the man, General Budanov, who headed Ukraine's military intelligence agency until very recently, when he was appointed as President Zelensky's chief of staff. He's actually wanted by the Russians for the role that he's played in helping Ukraine in their attacks into Russia. So it will be very, very extraordinary, the moment that they're all going to be sitting together at a table trying to talk peace.
And Deborah, stay with us. I want to get your thoughts on some controversial comments made by Donald Trump about NATO forces in Afghanistan. First of all, let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test. And I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
As you can imagine, huge amounts of criticism about what Donald Trump had to say. And it's not just coming from commentators, it's come from the UK government as well. I spoke to Stephen Kinnock, the health minister, a little while ago. Here's what he had to say in response to what Trump said overnight.
It just doesn't really add up, what he said, because the fact of the matter is the only time that Article 5 has been invoked was to go to the aid of the United States after 9/11, and many British soldiers and many soldiers from other European NATO allies gave their lives in support of American missions, American-led missions in places like Afghanistan and Iraq.
The mother of the youngest person to die fighting in Afghanistan said that President Trump lacks compassion. I mean, she's right, isn't she?
President Trump's comments are deeply disappointing. There is no other way to say that. I don't know really why he said them.
And Deborah, Stephen Kinnock, not the only person disappointed is his word, but upset by these comments.
Yes, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing for the US president to have said, extraordinarily thoughtless and also not based in fact. British forces have been fighting in Afghanistan since the very beginning, since the US first went to war following the September the 11th attacks back in 2001. NATO forces, as part of the only time that Article 5 of collective defence, that fundamental founding principle of the alliance, was invoked, mobilised to go onto the ground in Afghanistan. Yes, of course, different countries did have different rules of engagement. For example, the French and the Germans operated under different rules of engagement than, for example, the British. But all of them were in Afghanistan. The whole country was a front line. Yes, there were different areas of peril. But for the British, for the Danes, for the countries, the Canadians that were based down in Helmand province and in other areas of the south, they were putting themselves at risk every single day, fighting on the front line, many hundreds of them dying. You'll remember those images of British soldiers being brought back in coffins to Wootton Bassett, and the parades that we would see through the streets, the families that still now are grieving the soldiers that they lost, the soldiers too that suffered horrific injury, not just physical injury, but mental scars that have stayed with them until today. I was in Afghanistan from 2006, going down when British troops first set up their Camp Bastion in Helmand province. At that time, British soldiers were pushing forward into these operating bases where they were fighting and dying, trying to hold ground from the Taliban. And that was a place where they remained until 2014, when they finally pulled back from that part of Afghanistan. So the US president has really opened some wounds here with his thoughtless comments, claiming that NATO troops stayed back from the front line when absolutely they were front and forward.
Absolutely right. OK, Deb, for now, Inky, appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. Deborah Haynes there, just it can't underplay how incorrect Donald Trump's comments were, as Deb there, from her own personal reflections of her time reporting from the war in Afghanistan. British troops fought and died alongside their American allies, as many other nations' troops did as well. Some 850 soldiers from 19 non-US nations died in that war. So for Donald Trump to say that, just not true.
Yeah, and we're going to get plenty of reaction from veterans and families of those whose loved one died in Afghanistan throughout the day here. So do stay with us.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, President Trump has unveiled his plan to rebuild Gaza.
Yeah, the plan for so-called New Gaza features tower blocks and seaside resorts. Let's bring in our Europe correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, for a bit more on this. Ali, great to have you with us, of course, Europe correspondent now, but previously, in another life, the Middle East correspondent. What are we seeing from this latest iteration of Trump's plan for Gaza and its redevelopment?
Well, I mean, what we saw unveiled yesterday was an extraordinary sort of AI-generated vision of Gaza that might look kind of, spectacular on a PowerPoint presentation, or however it was delivered in Davos, but totally divorced from the reality on the ground there, where conditions in Gaza still are horrific. It is bad weather at this time of year in Gaza and in Israel. Many people, most people, are living in temporary accommodation tents. The streets are running with dirty water. Food is still, aid has been getting in, but food and medicine and basic needs are still difficult. And the Israeli military holds what's called the yellow line, an accusation that they've strayed beyond that in large parts of the territory. And there are some suggestions doing the rounds that, the Israeli military are starting to also entrench themselves into more permanent positions. And therefore, that raises questions as to whether Israel will ever fully leave Gaza. So, I think you've got this kind of vision from Donald Trump, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, who presented it yesterday, that looks all very well. But if you speak to anybody, and I regularly stay in touch with people in Gaza, and they will just say it is just a total fantasy and not what they need right now. And then you've got the border peace, which contains some questionable members. The chief amongst those, Vladimir Putin, wanted war criminal around the world. You've just been obviously talking about Ukraine with Deborah there, and yet he is supposedly going to be a member of the border peace. Most, not quite all, but most European countries, certainly the major European countries, haven't signed up to the border peace at the moment. And so what kind of credibility and influence and power that will have, we'll have to see.
Indeed. Well, Alistair, thanks very much indeed. Thanks for that. Now, a doctor working at a hospital embroiled in a water contamination scandal has told Sky News that patients could still be alive if her concerns had been listened to.
Yeah, Glasgow's Super Hospital has been hit by a crisis since it opened a decade ago, with some families accusing the NHS of a cover-up to conceal infections and deaths that may be linked to the water supply.
Well, a public inquiry wraps up today, and our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis has been examining the impact on the patients, the public and the staff.
It doesn't get much bigger than this. One of Europe's largest. Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital had a near £1 billion price tag. and got the royal treatment from day one. Opened by the late Queen in 2015, all was not as it seemed behind the scenes.
I was the infection control doctor on site when the building opened, and I immediately had concerns about the validation of the building and what we'd actually been provided.
Dr. Christine Peters still works there, a consultant microbiologist turned whistleblower. What sort of response were you getting?
It was a combination of being ignored, being, I would say, intimidated and mocked.
And we now know that Dr. Peters' concerns were well-founded. An inspection report carried out just days before this place opened in 2015 found high risks to the water supply.
Molly Cudahy was 15 when she was diagnosed with cancer. The schoolgirl later contracted infections at the hospital and gave evidence to a public inquiry examining the scandal.
We were told it was an environmental bug, so water or air or whatever.
That was in 2021. She died last year, aged 23.
It cost Molly her life. It cost her life, and the bacterial infection that Molly had such a debilitating impact on her quality of life. She was just the most remarkable girl. She was remarkable in so many ways. She could communicate on so many levels. As Molly's life was cut short because of the failings, the corporate failings within an institution that was there to protect her.
Police have declared the NHS in Glasgow a suspect in a corporate homicide investigation. That is ongoing. Paige ended up in a cancer ward aged 2, a devastating leukemia diagnosis made worse by an infection. She's now 10 and her mum says she's still living with the consequences.
As a parent, when you get the news that your child has cancer, you automatically think my kid is going to die. Then on top of that, remember we were only about 3 months into treatment, for them to come and say to us that, you know, now she's got a life-threatening infection on top of cancer. As a parent, you think your kid isn't going to pull through this. They had so many people coming forward, whistleblowers coming forward, you know, they had reports. Why didn't they act on it?
And the result of that is what?
Children died. Our children were sick.
For so many years, NHS bosses here had denied there was any link between water contamination and a raft of infections among child cancer patients. But a dramatic and unexpected U-turn in recent days, confirming that in some cases there possibly is now a link between conditions at this place and those infections. And they insist the hospital is now safe and major improvements have been made.
And NHS GGC offers a full and unreserved apology for the distress and trauma experienced by patients and families during this time.
Clearly, every day, thousands of patients are going to that hospital, and my colleagues in the hospital are brilliant. Do we have the evidence to show us that the hospital is safe today? From my personal point of view, I don't have the evidence that satisfies me, but I'm not the one who has to be satisfied.
Are you saying that you're not satisfied that
No.
that building is safe?
I think in terms of specific details, I don't have the details to say one way or the other. And after 10 years, that's not acceptable.
Questions remain, confidence clearly eroded in one of the biggest hospital scandals this country has ever seen. Conor Gillis, Sky News in Glasgow.
Well, to Iran now, where the death toll has reportedly risen to over 5,000 as the protests near the 1-month mark. President Donald Trump has now said that the US is moving a fleet of ships towards Iran, claiming the move is just in case he wants to take action against the country over its crackdown on protesters.
I'm very pleased to say I'm now joined by the actor and comedian Omid Jalili for his sense of what's happening in his country. Omid, thank you for coming in. Good morning to you.
Thank you, Kamal.
The internet is shut down. We can't see what's going on inside Iran. What's your sense of what's happening right now?
Well, whenever this happens, whenever there's a crackdown, all of us who have a bit of a platform, who are in the Iranian diaspora, we give over our Instagram and our Twitter over to the people who are voiceless. They shut everything down. And right now, based on a CNN report, there's a 1% connectivity, mainly through Elon Musk's Starlink satellites. And even those have been jammed. And so that's what I do. That's why I'm here, to give people a proper indication of what I've gathered is going on. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump was told by the regime that the killings have stopped, they're stopping, it's all stopped, executions have stopped. That is definitely not the case. The killings have continued. Mostly the regime have brought in foreign militia from Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, the former Iraqi deputy prime minister has just said Iraqi terrorist groups have gone in and massacred 12,000 people. They should be brought to account, and this is a heinous crime. The executions have continued apace, and the way they're doing it is protesters have been gathered and they've been put into detention centres. And we understand there are no trials. Some of these young people who are just 18 and were peacefully protesting are now drugged. There's one report we heard they've been drugged and have been asked to sign things that they killed a policeman, and they are executed behind the detention centres. This is going on at a pace, and there's also now a worry of chemical weapons being used.
Well, yes, tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, where is that report coming from, that suggestion coming from?
I saw that at the European Union. Somebody mentioned it like as if it was an absolute fact, that they're using chemical weapons on the people of Iran. Now, that is a huge red line for the international community and global leaders. Anyone who can remember Halabja in Iraq, 1988, where Saddam Hussein killed 5,000 Kurds in one day as part of a greater campaign to kill 50 to 100,000 people. Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria in 2013 killed 1,400. So when we find out and get evidence of this as a huge red line, there's usually severe consequences for those regimes, and neither of those regimes exist right now.
What could the consequences be? We heard Donald Trump, as you mentioned, with this sort of tough talk, this rhetoric. We know that there's a huge strike carrier group on its way to the region right now, so the pressure will perhaps build. But is there concern that the Iranians on the streets don't want to have someone like Donald Trump as being the one that's pushing them forward, or do they just want any help that they can get?
I think at the end of the day, when the regime is using foreign help themselves to basically kill thousands of people, and the latest numbers, I mean, you've just mentioned 5,000. A report by a human rights agency has now put the number at 43,000 killed, 10,000 blinded and 350,000 injured. If they're using foreign intervention to kill the people, I think the people of Iran who've been promised some kind of intervention are kind of expecting it, but also they understand that a regime that is on the verge of collapse, they're at their most dangerous. So we're just hoping that this will be resolved peacefully.
You say on the verge of collapse. Is that your expectation now? Because we saw huge numbers out on the streets in those early weeks. There was a sense that there was real momentum building. Do you feel that momentum is still there and it's enough to topple the regime?
I think the momentum is such that the people of Iran have made it very clear that this is do or die. They're not going to stop. They're carrying on. They're still chanting from the balconies and getting shot at. I think that at the end of the day, this regime cannot come back from killing so many people. Their legitimacy is gone. And I think that we're waiting and watching to see what's going to happen, because I don't think anyone can come back. Imagine in Britain, if you were away and you found out the British government had killed 43,000 people and whole areas of London like Bermondsey or Islington have just been wiped out, wouldn't that concern you? Wouldn't you think that regime, no, not that, according to the British government, the regime is weird, but wouldn't you think they would have no legitimacy?
So you talked about the British government. What more can be done by the Brits, by other Europeans? We've heard what Trump's got planned, but what about the UK?
I think it's really important for me to say that what I'm saying is not political. This is a human rights issue, and they're trying to resolve it diplomatically. I know that the European Union is trying to put the IRGC on the terrorist list. That the IRGC is basically the militia group that keeps them in power, and they're the ones doing all the global terrorism. So the idea is if you put them on the terrorist list, UK and Europe do that, the money gets cut off and then they will go away. And if with the threat of intervention, hopefully these people will go away. But I want to say one last thing as well. The people of Iran who are protesting, I think everyone really should know, it's not just for their freedom. They see this regime as the #1 funder of international global terrorism. So they're basically doing it for us. So while they're not free, we're not free. And they're trying to say, if we don't get rid of this regime right now that's been doing this to their own people, what are they going to do to the rest of the world?
Final thought for you, just personal, sorry, Anna.
Sure.
When's the last time you spoke to family?
Nothing at all, nothing at all. I mean, there's been absolutely no contact with anybody, and the little we're getting is just from the Telegram channels, from a few voices. I mean, I saw a terrible image of on a gate with blood all around it. Someone had written in their own blood, "Death to the dictator, help us."
Yeah, incredibly moving. Omar Jalili, we really appreciate you coming in and talking about it. Really important to keep talking about Iran. Thanks very much.
Appreciate that, Omar. Thank you for that. All right, let's go to the United States now, because a socialite, Paris Hilton's been on Capitol Hill talking about publication of videos of her.
Yeah, she was giving evidence, advocating for legislative changes. This is, as you can see the word defiance there, that's the Defiance Act, which is otherwise known as the Disrupt Explicit Forged Images and Non-Consensual Edits Act, is essentially to try to give protections for anyone who feel that they've been abused, basically, in this way, by having explicit videos aired of them. And it would allow them to take action against the creators and distributors of the content. And she talked very personally, I think, about her experience. Yeah. And she said, in fact, I think we can hear from her now. Let's take a listen.
Deep fake pornography has become an epidemic. I know today that there are over 100,000 explicit deep fake images of me made by AI. 100,000 circulating the internet. Not one of them is real. Not one of them is consensual. And each time a new one appears, that horrible feeling returns, that fear that someone somewhere is looking at it right now and thinking it's real.
Yeah, and she said people called it a scandal at the time, but she said it wasn't. No. It was abuse. And she talks about how there were no laws to protect her then, and she wants there now to be laws to protect other people.
Yes, it's extraordinary how much we have moved on as we rightly should have done. And it's right, at the time of those videos being released, it was sort of the internet just doing its thing and no one really cared so much about it.
Yeah, she said people laughed at her, that she was sort of the butt of people's jokes about it. It was sort of... she said that they sold her pain for clicks, is how she put it. So, yeah...
she's standing up now and, as you saw in those pictures, flanked by a load of politicians. I saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez there working alongside her, and hopefully some change will come in the United States.
Yeah, she's the one pushing that bill. She's, yeah.
The back of course, that stuff we saw on X as well with Elon Musk and that Grok software that was creating nude images of people. So it's something that's really in focus right now in the US, as it rightly should be.
Now here, the Home Secretary is planning to drastically cut the number of police forces in England and Wales.
Yeah, currently there are 43, and with the reforms plans, Shabana Mahmood is hoping to merge certain aspects of them, especially back office functions, in order to cut down on bureaucracy. And
the thought is that that will free up far more resources to support frontline policing. So let's get a few more details. Alex is here with us. Hi there, Alex. So Shabana Mahmood has not said a huge amount about this. We're going to get more details next week, aren't we? But is the idea, what we were saying there, this idea of trying to reshape resources a little bit so they go more to the front line?
I think that's it. I think this is a real doorstep issue. It taps into voters' concerns around quality of life. And I think the feeling is that police officers have been too tied up with paperwork and crime reporting behind the scenes and really need to be getting back on the front line, tackling antisocial behaviour, phone theft, that kind of thing. The kind of thing that really, really kind of cuts through to voters. And I think it's just worth reflecting that at the beginning of the year, the political landscape has been so shaped by what's going on globally. And so I think this is another kind of plank in the government trying to talk about what matters to voters here at home.
Yeah, so more details next week. Is it Monday?
I think early next week.
Early next week, yeah, more details, because we don't even know how many forces
we don't
be reduced down to.
She's just very much pitch rolling here.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Alex, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for that. All right, do stay with us here on Mornings. Coming up really soon, we're going to speak to an MP who fought in Afghanistan following those comments by Donald Trump that said NATO allies stayed away from the front line. Comments described by the government this morning as wrong. Well, thanks for staying with us. Let's take you through the headlines so far this morning. And a breakthrough in the now 4-year war in Ukraine could be within sight, as Ukrainian, Russian and US officials all meet up in the United Arab Emirates today. The Ukrainians are in the 4th year of Russia's invasion.
The Home Secretary is planning to drastically cut the number of police forces in England and Wales. Shabana Mahmood will outline plans next week, which could streamline the current model of 43 separate constabularies.
And a doctor working at a hospital that's embroiled in a water contamination scandal told Sky News patients could still be alive if her concerns had been listened to. A public inquiry into the scandal finished today.
So Donald Trump has caused outrage amongst Western nations after claiming that NATO troops avoided the front lines in Afghanistan.
I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test. And I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
Well, we're joined now by Conservative MP and former Army officer who served in Afghanistan, Ben Obsi-Jekti. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us today. What is your reaction to Donald Trump's comments?
Disappointment more than anything else. Disappointment and sadness. I'm a veteran of Afghanistan. I served there during Operation Herrick 11, which was 2009-10 in Sangin. I was part of 3 Rifles battle group, and we took very, very heavy casualties, the heaviest casualties of any British battle group since the Korean War. And Sangin was the area where a third of all British soldiers, the 457 who lost their lives in Afghanistan, were lost. And when we handed over, ultimately, as a nation to the US Marines, they too took heavy casualties in Sangin. So to suggest that we we're a little off the front lines and that we didn't do our fair share of the work in Afghanistan is outrageous. And I think it also insults our NATO partners as well. The Danes particularly took a very high rate of casualties per capita, higher in fact even than us, I think second only to the US. So I think to suggest that NATO allies did not do their fair share in Afghanistan when it was the US that invoked Article 5 is something of a disservice.
Ben, morning to you, it's Kamali here. I wonder if, I don't want you to psychoanalyse what Donald Trump's thinking in his mind, because that's a very difficult task, I am sure. But where do you think he's getting this from? I mean, it's flat wrong, it's disrespectful. What do you think's going on?
More than anything, with Donald Trump, he will say things for effect, and I think this comes off the back of the discussions around Greenland. Potentially, this is a way of lashing out. And you're right. I couldn't possibly hope to second guess what the president is thinking or why he goes down these routes. But potentially, I think this is said more for effect than anything else, and I don't think potentially the outrage that it causes is something that concerns him.
Just to continue on that theme a little bit further, I mean, do you think this is part of the narrative that he's talking about at the moment, that the US does all the heavy lifting within NATO, that it's the US that bears the burden when it comes to NATO?
There's a real issue around NATO and around the level of military spending that we're seeing at the moment. He has been right in the past. We do need to spend more money on defence, particularly here in the UK. We've seen recently that the Defence Investment Plan was due before Christmas. It's now been pushed out potentially to the spring or beyond. So there are real concerns around the amount that we're spending on our military spending here in the UK and across NATO in total. But for my own personal experience, I have 2 US Air Force bases here in my constituency, and those US personnel don't live on base, they live out in the villages and towns around us. And I know that they don't share the views of the president when it comes to working with British forces living in this country. So I think that we shouldn't look too closely at the relationship between ourselves and the US military, but this is potentially just a passing phase.
Potentially a passing phase. I'm glad you brought us on to how the US forces may well feel now. What do you think about going forward, though? Because what does this do to that sort of sense of morale, that sense of camaraderie within the 2 armed forces, us and the United States, that sense that perhaps at some point the person at the top may not have the back of their ally?
It's very, very difficult. I think that our two forces in particular within NATO, the US and the UK, are absolutely intertwined in the way that we work hand in glove on a day-to-day basis. Intelligence sharing. We have senior officers embedded in each other's armies, commanding rather large military formations. So there will always be that integral link between us, and that is very much where the special relationship absolutely thrives. I think that the knowledge that the current US administration is perhaps a little bit more laissez-faire with its approach to how it treats its partners and its allies, as we've seen in recent weeks, is something of a concern, and it's something that we will have to bear in mind going forwards. But I think every decision that we take now could have longer-term ramifications, and so it's very pleasing to see that we are prepared to take a robust stance with the US with regards to an issue like Greenland, but at the same time we need to bear in mind that we need to work with the US to achieve the best security situation that we can for the country.
And just going back to your response to Donald Trump's comments, those comments that NATO troops stayed a little off the front lines in Afghanistan, you said you were disappointed and sad. So I wondered if you would like to describe the sacrifice that you witnessed British troops making in Afghanistan.
Three Rifles Battle Group, which I was a part of during Operation Herrick 11, was based in Sangin with ground holding battle group, and the ground holding battle groups effectively took some of the heaviest casualties. And over the course of that tour, we sustained around 20% casualties. I believe around 30 soldiers were lost and 170 wounded. And some of those wounds are wounds that will live with those soldiers for their entire lives. Amputations, lost limbs, not to mention the mental scars that we don't see day to day. And whilst we all remember the coffins being brought back through Bryce Norton, draped in Union Jacks, that memory has faded for a lot of people. It was now 16 years ago, and so I think we need to bear in mind that there are still soldiers living amongst the general population who live with these wounds, both physical and mental, who still need our support and need our respect more than anything else. So I think we shouldn't forget the sacrifice made by the British soldiers in Afghanistan during that period. The scenes that we're seeing on the screen at the moment very much bring back a lot of memories, and I think it's important that we never lose sight of that, and we never forget the sacrifice that they made. And for us as politicians, it's incredibly important that we understand the recent commitment to potentially put troops on the ground in Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire. We need to bear in mind that we will be putting troops in harm's way, and we should not take those decisions lightly.
All right, Ben Obsijekti, appreciate you joining us this morning and for your reflections. Thank you very much for that. As we were showing those pictures there from Wootton Bassett, as Ben was reflecting on, many people will perhaps have forgotten those scenes that we used to have to see regularly in this country, those coffins coming back draped in the Union flag. And I got the sense that Mr Obsijekti was choosing his words carefully. As a politician now, of course, not an army officer. I do wonder what the feeling is within the armed forces right now. I'm sure there's some choice words being said by some members of the army right now, considering what they've heard from the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Of course, all the Air Force fought, the Navy fought as well, the armed forces all there in Afghanistan, all being disparaged for their role in going to the aid of the United States after the Article 5 was triggered, the only time in history it's been triggered, and the US got the aid of its allies. Donald Trump doesn't think that actually happened. Yeah, that's right, and we'll get plenty of reaction from families as well who have lost their loved ones in Afghanistan a little later in the programme. Right now, though, the Met Police are facing a major legal challenge over the use of their facial recognition technology. Well, last year, a 39-year-old called Sean Thompson was wrongly flagged as a criminal and held for almost an hour. He's now bringing a case against the police. Well, let's speak now to Liberty, the director of Campaign Group Liberty, Akiko Hart. Akiko Hart, morning to you. Thank you very much for being with us. The story that we're keeping a close eye on here on mornings, the police use of facial recognition technology. Just take us through the case of Sean Thompson and what we're going to see next week at the High Court.
Thank you very much for having me. So facial recognition cameras allow the police to track and monitor people in public places. And essentially what's happening at the moment is that the police are expanding the use of these cameras, but without any safeguards or legislation around it. So specifically on the Sean Thompson case, which we're not working on, that's an organisation called Big Brother Watch that's taking the case with Sean Thompson. And Sean Thompson is a community worker in London who is a black community worker who is an anti-knife crime campaigner who was stopped by the police and misidentified despite showing his ID. And the case is essentially around the racial bias that's at the heart of facial recognition technology. So what we know is that facial recognition technology is racially biased. So you're more likely to be stopped if you are black, you are more likely to be stopped and misidentified if you are Asian, and you are 250 times more likely to be misidentified if you are a black woman. And what's deeply concerning about this, if that wasn't concerning enough, is that we have evidence to show that the police knew about this racial bias a year ago and pushed on with the rollout regardless. So what we're calling for are some common sense safeguards and legislation around the use of facial recognition technology that keep us safe.
Akiko, just give us that stat again about black women and the false positive rate, because that is astounding. And after that, talk to us about where the government are with this, because as you say, this is due to be sort of rolled out by police forces across the country. There's already some fixed vans in places across London. I know there's one down in Croydon. I think South Wales Police have a number of sites as well where they've got these fixed vans. Because the government want to make this a key part of their tool, they say, to deal with crime.
Absolutely. So I will repeat that statistic again because it is absolutely astounding. So if you are a black woman, you are 250 times more likely to be misidentified under facial recognition technology. That is shocking. It's absolutely shocking that the police knew this and pressed on regardless. At the moment, there is no legislation or safeguards around this. And actually, this reminds me a little bit of the piece you had earlier on with Paris Hilton and the deepfake pornography online, where we are living in a digital age, but essentially we have analog laws for a digital age. And this is another example of that, where I think people assume that these safeguards are in place and they are absolutely not. So where we are at the moment is that there's a public consultation and the government is looking quite intently at the possibility of safeguards, a governance framework and legislation. So we'll see what comes out of it in the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, it's one we're going to keep an eye on, as I said, here on Mornings. Akiko Hart, thank you so much for joining us from Liberty there, the Director of Campaigns there at Liberty. And let me just tell you what the Metropolitan Police have had to say about this, because as Akiko said, it is being rolled out by police forces across the country. The Met say, we remain confident our use of facial recognition is lawful. It's taken more than 1,700 offenders off the streets, including those wanted for rape and child abuse, and is a vital and effective policing tool that helps keep Londoners safe, they say. We've robust safeguards in place to protect people's privacy rights, and 85% of Londoners support its use. If a member of the public walks past the cameras and is not on the watch list, their biometrics are immediately and permanently deleted. We'll continue to engage with communities to build understanding about how this technology works, providing reassurances that there are rigorous checks and balances in place to protect people's privacy rights. That's the Metropolitan Police in response to this reporting Sean Thompson's cases before the High Court next week.
Yeah, the Met, basically, they've been arguing all along. They think that the technology is game-changing. They think it's good for public safety, and they cite the survey they mentioned there about the public, they think, being on side with it. But really interesting research that we heard about, and this case will be really interesting as well.
Definitely will. All right. Now, TikTok has sealed a deal to create a new American body that's separate from its Chinese operations.
Yeah, the deal hands over the company's American division to investors backed by Donald Trump. So let's find out more. Molly is here with some of the details. And Donald Trump had basically said, we're going to ban TikTok unless it gets rid of its Chinese ownership because he's worried about security. So this seems to be the solution, is it?
Essentially, yeah, it's been on the cards for a while now, and essentially this is a deal that's been struck to avoid that ban coming into place. We saw at the beginning of last year, didn't we, TikTok go dark for American users for 14 hours, but it felt like much longer, I'm sure, to many of those people using the app. But this is a sort of discussion, controversial discussion that's been hanging over some 150 million users of TikTok in America for years now, with various governments, as you say, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, talking about their concerns over national security, with fears that the Chinese-owned platform could share user data with Chinese authorities, the Chinese government, who in turn could perhaps influence and manipulate TikTok's algorithm with propaganda claims that have been denied by TikTok. So essentially what we've got now is this $14 billion deal to give basically US investors more control of the app for people in America. And what they've done is they've sold the majority stake, amounting to about 80%, to American investors, including Oracle, which is a US software giant, co-founded by a man called Larry Ellison, who's a Trump supporter. So ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, will still keep that 20% share. Look, there are lots of unknowns about how exactly this is going to change the kind of user interface for people using the app in America. TikTok overnight said in a statement that user data will actually be stored and operated inside the US cloud environment, so not giving Chinese engineers that control. How it actually looks, how people use it, it's not yet clear. It's been sort of talked about in terms of they'll receive slightly different content, perhaps, to how we might see it, how we might see TikTok in terms of what the algorithm is feeding them. But certainly Donald Trump will tout this as a win, as a success, and it's clearly a sign that Washington and Beijing can come to an agreement and a deal.
Yeah, really interesting. And I think countries around the world will be watching closely, won't they?
Yeah.
Because not the only
implications
to
for
raise
wider
questions
than
about TikTok. Yeah. Absolutely, Molly, thank you.
Thank you, Molly. All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, it'll turn colder over the weekend, but the unsettled theme looks to continue, with localised flooding and disruption in the northeast and southwest today. The Portuguese-named storm Ingrid will take rain across southern Britain and the south of Ireland this morning, turning showery for some later. Further north, it'll be dry overall, with any early fog lifting, but eastern Scotland will have outbreaks of rain and hill snow. It's going to turn windier, with coastal gales in the northeast. And the afternoon will bring further showers or longer spells of rain, with thundery downpours possible in the southwest.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
All right, well, Jackie has joined us.
Is that funny?
No, we couldn't decide who was going to introduce you.
You do it.
You shouldn't do it because your voice is
I'm getting
struggling
it's getting worse now.
A little bit this morning.
Anyway, welcome.
Yes, thank you. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Winter Olympics, which starts 2 weeks today, and we're going to see Princess Kate and Prince William trying their hand at curling, which, if you haven't seen those pictures, I mean, they should be on the team, they're excellent. We're going to bring you the latest after last night's games in the Europa League as well. We'll show you how Villa and Forest got on in those matches.
Forest fans, look away.
Now.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety, as Russian drones will be trying to find this position. We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming. I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful. With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real. Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans.
The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Oh, there you are. Now, cyclists are pushing the government to invest in facilities to get more people out on their bikes.
The first phase of the scheme saved the NHS over £13 million already, which is not too bad, is it? And
it's not too bad. They want £30 million now. This is British Cycling in partnership with Sport England. They are wanting this extra investment because they are saying that the first phase, which involved that was the saving, isn't it? £13 million it saved the NHS, they're saying. They're now saying, let's push for more, let's push for phase 2, because getting people on bikes is really healthy.
Absolutely. And as I think the only cyclist on this desk, Jackie can ride a bike but doesn't have a bike. We discovered that last...
I think I can ride a bike. I had a bike when I was 9.
You haven't tested it for a while.
It was a blue rally. I don't still have it.
I bet you're pretty good. You've got good balance.
So, yeah, as the only cyclist on this desk, we are slightly concerned. Do you?
Yeah.
What do we think about the provision of cycling then, Anna? Is there enough space on the roads for us to get around and about?
In London, the cycle lanes are patchy.
Yeah, patchy at best. Potholes everywhere.
I think there's a lot of cycle lanes.
Because you're never on your bike.
Because you're in your car. Yeah.
Cycle lanes that go to nowhere. Listen, we're going to have a little bit of a look at this. So if you've got any stories about the provision of cycling where you live, the provision that's not great, then do let us know. mornings@sky.uk. You can let us know in the next hour or so.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking to former Olympic cyclist Clancy in the next hour as well, who is part of this big push to get people on their bikes. So let us know your experience. But right now...
Yes.
Let's talk other sport.
Suddenly Kamali's face drops because he knows I'm going to talk about Forest, which is his team. And they had a bit of a catastrophe last night. I don't know if you watched it.
A bad 54 minutes, but a bad 90 minutes in total.
I was watching it.
54 seconds.
It was the dullest of the dullest of the dullest matches in the history of dullness ever. In the first half, there was nothing to talk about. The pundits had nothing to talk about at half-time. There was no crowd. It was kind of miserable. No shots on goal. And then out comes the second half, and there was 1 minute where it all went pear-shaped. We can have a look.
I'm not going to look.
For Forest, in fact. So 53rd minute, Forest won a penalty. Should have been a great moment. Morgan Gibbs-White took it. It was saved. Bad penalty. Well done, Braga keeper, by the way. 54 seconds later, down the other end, Ryan Yates scored an own goal. So 1-0 Braga. They had no shots on target in the whole match. That was enough for the win. There was a late red card as well on Elliot Anderson. All in all, a very bad night, which means that Forest now no longer automatically qualify.
Yes.
Most likely won't, and they will have to go and do playoff matches, which were in a season where you're just trying to survive. You just don't want extras. You don't want extras at all.
It's been nice playing in Europe, but that wasn't a good performance by the boys.
Well, there were 7 changes, but still, you know, they were better. Better for Villa last night. Really was really good for Villa last night, and it's so good for Unai Emery in this competition, Europa League, 'cause he's won it 4 times. Kind of owns it a little bit. I'm sure he's thinking about they can win this trophy. So last night they qualify for the last 16 with a game to spare. Jadon Sancho, he got the first goal for the club. The first one he scored. That was enough for the win. They held on against Fenerbahce in Turkey, and it was Unai Emery's 100th game in the competition. There was a bit of a shove at the end, though, on one of his players, Yuri Tielemans, and it didn't look good. He played it down afterwards. He said he's like my son, but there was words and a push no one is quite sure why that happened.
No, a little bit. I think he was coming off the pitch too quickly. I think Naomi wasn't happy.
He was winding down the clock.
Yeah,
he should have walked,
taken his time, really walked on slow, taken off his pads.
Yeah, all that.
His shirt in and all that stuff. Wasted time.
And also, we haven't got long, but I was just at the Olympic fitting session yesterday, where the Olympians get their kit for the Olympics, which starts 2 weeks today.
Yeah, it's so soon, isn't it?
Curling actually starts sooner in the mixed curling. But do you know who's really good at curling? Princess Kate.
Is it you? Oh.
No, it's definitely not me. Ice and me
really
do not go together. But look, Prince William, being coached by Bruce Moat, who is the skip of the GB curling team and the world #1 team, no less. And that's pretty good.
There's a lot of jeopardy there, isn't there?
You haven't seen how it does with the stones at the other end. I mean, the release is fun.
That could have been a very disastrous royal engagement, but it was another triumph.
Oh, yeah, they're game for it.
Stayed on their
good
feet.
For them.
Very good for them.
I thought they were good.
See you next hour.
See you in a bit.
See you all again real soon. Stay with us.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Hello, very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Moscow accepts an invitation to the first ever trilateral peace talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia, being held later today in Abu Dhabi.
The Families of British soldiers killed in Afghanistan join politicians in their fury over Trump's claims that NATO troops stayed away from the front line during the war.
The Home Secretary has a plan to slash the number of police forces in England and Wales. She hopes it'll cut waste.
A bit later on this hour, we'll have Jackie here for all the day's sports news, including a bit of an odd joke from the boss of FIFA.
Yeah, we'll tell you what that is in a moment. Also, is this one of Britain's biggest hospital scandals? We hear ongoing concerns over the water supply at one Glasgow hospital. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for being with us today. Russia has said yes to an invitation to join the first three-way peace talks with Ukraine and the US.
And there is no delay. Those talks are happening in Abu Dhabi later on today. Well, it follows a mad dash by Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who met Putin at the Kremlin last night to confirm today's talks. The US president spoke to journalists on his way back from Davos, saying everyone will have to compromise to get a deal done.
They'll make concessions. Everybody's making concessions to get it done. Europe is going to be a part of it. It's got to be a part of it. Look, it's more for Europe than for me. I mean, I'm doing this more for Europe than for me. I'm doing it to save lives, number one. I'm doing it secondarily for Europe. I'm not doing it so much for the U.S. It doesn't affect us very much.
Well, Donald Trump's final engagement before leaving Davos was with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who Trump insists wants to make a deal for the people of Ukraine.
He said he'd like to make a deal. I mean, you know, there's not much you can say. People know the parameters. It's not like, you know, we're discussing things that have been discussed for 6 or 7 months, and he came and he said he wants to make a deal because I wasn't necessarily here. I think he should want to make a deal. It's pretty tough. It's really tough on the people of Ukraine, I'll tell you that.
Well, this all follows President Zelensky's speech in Davos, which he took aim at Europe in for their inaction against Russia and Putin. Last night, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen responded to Zelensky's claims, saying Europe has sufficiently supported Ukraine during Russia's invasion.
We have been supporting the heroic fight of the Ukrainian people for now 4 years. I think on our side, actions speak louder than words. We are the largest supporter of Ukraine in the last 4 years, more than 193 billion euros. And the European Council has just decided to add to this sum another 90 billion euros for the next 2 years. We know that we will never match the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people. But what we can do is stand by their side, and I think the figures speak for themselves, but also the personal engagement of all of us is speaking for itself.
Well, earlier our Security and Defence Editor Deborah Haynes joined us providing an update from Kyiv.
Well, there isn't a huge amount of optimism that there's going to be a sudden breakthrough, simply because that last sticking point is the biggest point of all, the biggest obstacle. It's all about the land, the territory. Russia wants to take the whole of the Donbass, that region, Donetsk and Luhansk in the east of the country. Yes, it already controls about 80% of that land after almost 4 full years of its full-scale war, and actually dating back to 2014 when Russia first invaded Ukraine, seizing Crimea. But the Ukrainians still holding on to a section of that area. They have fought and died. It is a red line made in blood, and it is very, very unclear how the two sides are going to be able to reach some kind of compromise. But it's really important to stress just how extraordinary the meeting is going to be today in the UAE, when you have actually senior Ukrainian and Russians officials sitting across the table from each other, sworn enemies. One of the Ukrainian representatives is the man, General Budanov, who headed Ukraine's military intelligence agency until very recently, when he was appointed as President Zelensky's chief of staff. He's actually wanted by the Russians for the role that he's played in helping Ukraine in their attacks into Russia. So it will be very, very extraordinary the moment that they're all going to be sitting together at a table trying to talk peace.
And Deborah, stay with us. I want to get your thoughts on some controversial comments made by Donald Trump about NATO forces in Afghanistan. First of all, let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test. And I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
As you can imagine, huge amounts of criticism about what Donald Trump had to say. And it's not just coming from commentators, it's come from the UK government as well. I spoke to Stephen Kinnock, the health minister, a little while ago. Here's what he had to say in response to what Trump said overnight.
It just doesn't really add up, what he said, because the fact of the matter is the only time that Article 5 has been invoked was to go to the aid of the United States after 9/11, and many, many British soldiers and many soldiers from other European NATO allies gave their lives in support of American missions, American-led missions in places like Afghanistan and Iraq.
The mother of the youngest person to die fighting in Afghanistan said that President Trump lacks compassion. I mean, she's right, isn't she?
President Trump's comments are deeply disappointing. There is no other way to say that. I don't know really why he said them.
And Deborah, Stephen Kinnock, not the only person disappointed is his word, but upset by these comments.
Yes, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing for the US president to have said, extraordinarily thoughtless and also not based in fact. British forces have been fighting in Afghanistan since the very beginning, since the US first went to war following the September the 11th attacks back in 2001. NATO forces, as part of the only time that Article 5 of collective defence, that fundamental founding principle of the alliance, was invoked, mobilised to go onto the ground in Afghanistan. Yes, of course, different countries did have different rules of engagement. For example, the French and the Germans operated under different rules of engagement than, for example, the British. But all of them were in Afghanistan. The whole country was a front line. Yes, there were different areas of peril. But for the British, for the Danes, for the countries, the Canadians that were based down in Helmand province and in other areas of the south, they were putting themselves at risk every single day, fighting on the front line, many hundreds of them dying. You'll remember those images of British soldiers being brought back in coffins to Wootton Bassett, and the parades that we would see through the streets, the families that still now are grieving the soldiers that they lost, the soldiers too that suffered horrific injury, not just physical injury, but mental scars that have stayed with them until today. I was in Afghanistan from 2006, going down when British troops first set up their Camp Bastion in Helmand province. At that time, British soldiers were pushing forward into these operating bases where they were fighting and dying, trying to hold ground from the Taliban. And that was a place where they remained until 2014, when they finally pulled back from that part of Afghanistan. So the US president has really opened some wounds here with his thoughtless comments, claiming that NATO troops stayed back from the front line when absolutely they were front and forward.
Absolutely right. Deb Haynes there reporting from Kyiv. reacting to those comments from Donald Trump. Now, Greenland, of course, hasn't been off the agenda for a couple of weeks, it feels now, despite some of the heat being taken out of it a little bit earlier this week.
Well, yes, and now the Danish Prime Minister is meeting the head of NATO to discuss the issue. So let's talk about it a little bit further with our correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. Hi there, Alistair. And there was a great deal of relief, wasn't there, when Donald Trump talked about having reached a framework agreement on the issue of Greenland and backtracked on his threat of tariffs. But how much detail do we now have of what that framework looks like? And do we know if all the parties concerned are happy about it?
We don't really have much detail at all. I mean, a lot of it is guesswork. I think those that have a clearer idea of what might have been agreed or discussed with Donald Trump, the likes of Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, who is meeting with the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen in his residence here in Brussels this morning for a private meeting. I think they're keeping it pretty close because I don't think they want too many leaks to the media. It's such a fragile situation still. And I think there's actually, frankly, a lot to still sort out. Yeah, I mean, people here and all the EU leaders were here last night for an emergency summit, of which, you know, the steam had come out of it a little bit because the threat of tariffs against European countries had gone away. But I think Greenland is a line. And I think everything that happens from now onwards will be seen as, you know, pre the Greenland crisis and post the Greenland crisis. The mindset here in Brussels, in European capitals, has changed. They know it cannot go on as normal, or what was normal, with Donald Trump any longer. You know, that's what happened. I think the question is how will it change going forward? And that's a harder question to answer. But the fact is, a country like America, with a president like Donald Trump, can just be so much more agile than an alliance like the EU with 27 different countries, 27 different national interests. But Europe is trying to become far more united in the way it responds and handles Donald Trump. I don't think we will see the sort of a sycophancy that we've seen from various European leaders in trying to deal with Donald Trump quite so much anymore. I think the Europeans know that they have levers that they can pull that, you know, could potentially hurt the Americans, like trade, for example. I think the Europeans know that they have other allies around the world, Canada, Japan, Australia, and it's going to have to be a different way of doing business. But finally, I mean, you know, let's just step back a few days. You know, European leaders arrived here last night with a bit of a spring in the step that they had sort of staved off the immediate threat of what was going on with Greenland. But this is an idea that the US president had threatened to invade European territory. You know, that is not something, you know, and the success of that not happening is not really something European leaders should really be celebrating. It is an extraordinary change in that transatlantic alliance.
Absolutely is. All right, Alistair, for now, thank you for that. We'll keep an eye on those meetings around Greenland happening today.
Indeed.
On Sky News.
Meanwhile, though, a doctor working at a hospital embroiled in a water contamination scandal has told Sky News that patients could still be alive if her concerns have been listened to.
Yeah, Glasgow's super hospital has been hit by crisis since it opened a decade ago, with some families accusing the NHS there of a cover-up, concealing the infections and deaths that may be linked to its water supply.
Well, a public inquiry wraps up today, and our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis has been examining the impact on the patients, the public and staff.
It doesn't get much bigger than this. One of Europe's largest. Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital had a near £1 billion price tag and got the royal treatment from day one. Opened by the late Queen in 2015, all was not as it seemed behind the scenes.
I was the infection control doctor on site when the building opened, and I immediately had concerns about the validation of the building and what we'd actually been provided.
Dr. Christine Peters still works there, a consultant microbiologist turned whistleblower. What sort of response were you getting?
It was a combination of being ignored, being, I would say, intimidated and mocked.
And we now know that Dr. Peters' concerns were well-founded. An inspection report carried out just days before this place opened in 2015 found high risks to the water supply.
Molly Cudahy was 15 when she was diagnosed with cancer. The schoolgirl later contracted infections at the hospital and gave evidence to a public inquiry examining the scandal.
We were told it was an environmental bug, so water or air or whatever.
That was in 2021. She died last year, aged 23.
It cost Molly her life. It cost her life, and the bacterial infection that Molly had such a debilitating impact on her quality of life. She was just the most remarkable girl. She was remarkable in so many ways. She could communicate on so many levels. As Molly's life was cut short because of the failings, the corporate failings within an institution that was there to protect her.
Police have declared the NHS in Glasgow a suspect in a corporate homicide investigation. That is ongoing. Paige ended up in a cancer ward aged 2, a devastating leukemia diagnosis made worse by an infection. She's now 10 and her mum says she's still living with the consequences.
As a parent, when you get the news that your child has cancer, you automatically think, my kid is going to die. Then on top of that, remember, we were only about 3 months into treatment for them to come and say to us that, you know, now she's got a life-threatening infection on top of cancer. As a parent, you think your kid isn't going to pull through this. They had so many people coming forward, whistleblowers coming forward, you know, they had reports. Why didn't they act on it?
And the result of that is what?
Children died. Our children were sick.
For so many years, NHS bosses here had denied there was any link between water contamination and a raft of infections among child cancer patients. But a dramatic and unexpected U-turn in recent days, confirming that in some cases there possibly is now a link between conditions at this place and those infections. And they insist the hospital is now safe and major improvements have been made.
And NHS GGC offers a full and unreserved apology for the distress and trauma experienced by patients and families during this time.
Clearly, every day, thousands of patients are going to that hospital, and my colleagues in the hospital are brilliant. Do we have the evidence to show us that the hospital is safe today? From my personal point of view, I don't have the evidence that satisfies me, but I'm not the one who has to be satisfied.
Are you saying that you're not satisfied that
No.
that building is safe?
I think in terms of specific details, I don't have the details to say one way or the other. And after 10 years, that's not acceptable.
Questions remain. Confidence clearly eroded in one of the biggest hospital scandals this country has ever seen. Conor Gillis, Sky News in Glasgow.
Do stay with us, we've got lots coming up. We're going to be talking about pensions in a moment. We've got a pensions expert looking particularly at the gap between men and women and how much they save for their pensions. That's
Very
coming up
important
next.
topic. Stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
All right, thanks for staying with us now. A new report has highlighted the hidden factors that are said to stop women's retirement.
Yeah, it's a really interesting report because it says that men hold an average of £75,000 in pension wealth by the time they're 59, but in comparison, women on average hold only 19,000.
Wow, that's a huge disparity.
It's a huge disparity, so let's talk about it a little bit. We're joined now by financial educator and chartered accountant Abigail Foster. Hello to you.
Morning, Abigail.
That is a big gap.
Yes.
So why is it happening?
So in the UK, we have something, well, all over the world, we have the gender pay gap, which is effectively the disparity that we're seeing between women at the beginning of their years and women at the end of their careers. So at the beginning of their careers, we're seeing not a lot of disparity between men and women, but by the end of their careers, we're seeing a lot of men in C-suite roles and above, and we're not seeing women get to that point. And I think, personally, it comes from a lack of financial education at our school level, because we're not helping women understand how they need to financially protect themselves throughout their career. But pensions specifically that comes from this gender pay gap issue is that on average, women are taking career breaks or unpaid care leave, also known as motherhood. We're seeing massive gaps for women throughout their careers when they move around, or they might tend to, I don't necessarily agree with this point, but it's in the article, they tend to take lower paid roles. And so therefore, on average, they're earning less throughout their careers and therefore contributing less. Mm-hmm. We have in the UK defined benefit pensions and defined contribution pensions. Defined benefits known as the final salary pensions. They're very much outdated and a lot of them are gone now.
Partly because they were quite advantageous to
they were.
people who had them. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
and they put the risk on the employer. Now, majority of people are on defined contribution pensions, which puts risk on the individual. Mm-hmm. And that means for women, if you're contributing less, you're going to see less in your pension pot at retirement, which is wildly unfair. It does need reform, but obviously things that people can do is obviously be aware that your workplace pension is an auto-enrolment scheme, so you contribute, so does your employer. It's a 5% you, 3% them. And opting out of that means you are leaving money on the table. Your employer doesn't have to contribute. So I would really recommend women specifically thinking about that.
And you teach financial literacy. I mean, do we know enough about pensions? Do we think enough about pensions? I know that there was a time in my youth where pensions seemed kind of scary. It seemed like a long way away.
Be very old, you thought,
I wanted to keep all the money in my pocket, and people just don't think they need to stick it away somewhere.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of long-term mindset when it comes to the next generation. I get it. When I was 18, thinking about something in my 60s and 70s it seemed almost pointless. And so lots of young people completely pull out of the pension and don't realise the compound effect that it can have from just putting a small amount in the early stages of their career. You know, it's huge because obviously pensions are investments and they compound over time. So, yeah, I do think we need to be doing more with the next generation of women to be really pushing forward that pensions are really important, or investing in themselves is really important to help make sure that we bridge this gap, because it's only getting worse. You know, it used to be that women had 50% in their pension pots compared to male counterparts. It's getting worse, and that's really sad.
And when is it too late to do something about it? I mean, if you're kind of all there and think, well, it's only a few years till I retire, there's no point. I mean, at what stage is that the right call?
I think I would say never. As an accountant, as a financial educator, I see, please don't not think about your pension. But if you are so close to retirement, you might want to consider a couple of things, like your state pension. If you've contributed enough years to get the full state pension, might be worth looking into whether you buy some Class 3 years to get to the full state pension. Or you might just invest in a stocks and shares ISA, which, you know, is same as putting into a similar to putting into a pension because you're investing. That might be something a bit more flexible for people nearer retirement, but still giving you that investment push. But yeah, never think it's too late. It's like that with all finance. There's always more you can be learning about.
Yeah, it's something I talk to my children about, saying, and it doesn't feel like the right thing to do now at your
really
age.
Important to get it started as soon as possible. Back to the education piece. I mean, I feel like I vaguely remember there being something in the budget about financial literacy coming onto the curriculum. Is that happening? Are you seeing more in schools?
Yes, we are. So I go and teach in schools, have been doing for the last 4 years, and I love it. And I get the opportunity to go into many schools from year 1 to year 13. But something that's not been the case for many years is some schools have to do it, but not all schools have had to do it. And so now there's a lot more conversation happening around, OK, more schools need to do it. And also, instead of just the sixth form or just the senior school, try and get it across the board. So there is a lot of petition.
And the kids quite engaged?
Incredibly. I've never gone to a school where the kids haven't wanted me there.
Yeah.
You know, it's usually the session where the teachers come away and go, I've never seen the kids so engaged. They've never asked so many questions. And it's because we all really care about it. It's really personal to us. And I think it's something that I just feel like should, alongside things like mental health and physical health that we should be teaching our next generation, financial health should be just as important.
Yeah, Abigail, really good point. Thanks very much indeed. I learned nothing at school about
Neither did
personal finances, so I...
learned a bit this morning, though, haven't we?
Yeah, I've learned a lot.
Thanks, Abigail.
Not too late.
Too late. All right, well, still to come. We'll look at a pretty deep question. Do you matter? You matter. You definitely
You
matter. So do you. Stay with us. All right, thanks for staying with us. Let's take you through the headlines this morning. And a breakthrough in the now 4-year-long Russian invasion of Ukraine could be within sight as Ukrainian, Russian and US officials meet up in the United Arab Emirates today. It's currently, of course, the 4th winter of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Donald Trump has insulted Afghan war veterans and undermined the NATO alliance in the same breath, claiming he wasn't sure if the alliance would be there if the US needed it. He also suggested that Allied troops sent to Afghanistan were kept off the front lines.
A doctor working at a hospital embroiled in a water contamination scandal has told Sky News that patients could still be alive if her concerns had been listened to. A public inquiry into that scandal in Glasgow concludes today.
Now, do you feel like you matter? That's the question being asked by our next guest. So let's bring them in. It's author of Mattering, The Secret to Building a Life of Deep Connection and Purpose, Jennifer Wallace, who joins us now from New York. A very, well, good morning to us. It's probably the middle of the night for you. I'm just working out in my head. But thanks very much indeed for joining us. So you talk about the importance of mattering. So explain to us, first of all, what you mean by that.
Yeah, so as you said, I've been going around the world asking a question: do you feel like you matter? To retirees, to doctors, to educators, to college students, and the answer was so often no, or not anymore. One college student I interviewed said that she only felt like she mattered when her GPA was high and her weight was low. But mattering is not conditional. Mattering is the feeling valued for who you are unconditionally and having an opportunity to add value to the world around you.
And it probably goes without saying the reason why that's important, but take us through the reason why people need to start recognising that they do matter.
Yes, so researchers who study it say after the motivation, the drive for food and shelter, it is the motivation to matter that drives human behavior for better or for worse. So when we feel like we matter, we thrive, we show up fully, we want to engage, we want to connect, we want to contribute. But when we are made to feel like we don't matter, we can either withdraw, become anxious, depressed, turn to substances to try to alleviate that pain, or lash out in anger, road rage, online attacks, political extremes are desperate attempts to say, oh, I'll show you I matter. We're seeing this at the global level.
So this is really important then. So how do we make sure that other people feel like they matter? People close to us in our family or people we work with, how do we go about doing that?
Yeah, so in the book, I lay out a framework that I've come to think of as the SAID framework. It stands for significance, appreciation, feeling invested in, and feeling depended on. I was struck in my interviews at how often when I asked people what made them feel like they mattered, it wasn't an award at work. It wasn't a milestone birthday toast. It was in the everyday. It was in small, everyday moments. Someone saving a seat for them at the table, someone remembering their birthday, someone checking in when they'd been sick, or a neighbor dropping off a pot of soup. These are the feelings that make us feel like we matter.
Jennifer, it's more than just sort of like personal self-esteem then, isn't it? It's like a collective thing. Everyone needs to be sort of invested in this to make sure that it works properly.
Right. We need to matter to ourselves. We need to matter to our colleagues, to our friends, to our community at large. That is what we require, to feel valued and to have the opportunity to add value back in all of those domains.
So do you think people feel less valued now than in the past? And if so, why? Why is it changing?
Yes, well, at least when I was growing up, there were daily activities that baked in mattering. So we knew our neighbors, they relied on us, we relied on them. Workplaces had a kind of social contract where if you were loyal, you would be able to receive a pension and your corporations would be loyal to you. Friendships, we had time and bandwidth to invest in those friendships. Now people are reporting that friendships feel hollow. And I think tech has played a role here, that, instead of going out and celebrating with our friends, we often find ourselves sitting on our couches and scrolling and building friendships over text. But really what we need is this time and bandwidth to protect and to invest in these friendships that people just don't seem to be doing anymore.
Jennifer, you're taking on to my favourite topic, the damages of social media in many aspects. So, look, how can it be regained, then, this sense of mattering, this sense of self that society needs to have in the world that we find ourselves in when social media is ubiquitous and so many of us are drawn to those devices?
Yes, so I get into so many practical, actionable tips in the book. But I would say one thing to keep in mind is to remember to connect to our own impact and connect others to their impact. So if someone offers you a piece of advice, to close the loop and circle back, send them a quick email saying, I took that advice, and here's the great thing that happened because of it. We need to connect people to the positive impact that they're making in our individual worlds, and also the impact that we make in our own world. So here's a simple prompt that I do now every night. I don't love journaling, so this is just a quick little journal. 2-prompt question. When did I feel value today? And how, in some small way, did I add value to the world around me? Did I offer advice to a friend? Did I let somebody in traffic? Was I kind to a neighbor? So these are small, everyday impacts that can remind us that we matter in the world around us.
Well, Jennifer Wallace, we really appreciate you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Really interesting stuff. Thanks very much indeed for staying up late or getting up early for us. Either way, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
What she said as well. Well, first, before I go to that, let's just bring you the latest that we have coming out of Abu Dhabi. We can now report that those trilateral talks, the first ever trilateral talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia, have now got underway in the UAE. Hopes that there could be some progress in the peace talks to bring about an end to Russia's war in Ukraine. I think they're scheduled for 2 days in the UAE, and they have now got underway.
Yeah, they have got underway with a certain amount of positive build-up to it. Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, saying that he felt that a deal was close and that there was one issue still left to be resolved, but President Zelensky has confirmed that that issue is the issue of territory, so it's a big issue. So we'll wait and see whether progress is indeed made over this next day or so, and we'll keep you updated.
We will. Just circling back to what I was going to say about Jennifer and that thing about sort of responding and that sort of closing the loop. Really important, I think, it is to respond to those text messages. I'm terrible at getting messages and not responding timely enough or going back to the person. And I think that we can all do a little bit more of that, just to make sure, even if we're connecting by text, to stay in touch with each other.
Yeah, and a lot of people get validation now on social media, don't they? If you get a like on a photo or you don't get a like, it can make or break your day. Apparently. I never post anything. But
it's not that important. But you do matter, and you matter.
Yes.
And this next story matters as well. Sorry, that's a really bad segue. But the Home Secretary is planning to drastically cut the number of police forces, apparently, in England and Wales.
That's right. Right now there are 43, and with her reform, Shabana Mahmood is hoping to merge certain aspects of them, especially back-office functions, in order to cut bureaucracy.
Yeah, the thought is that it will free up more resources to support frontline policing. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Alex Rogers, for a bit more on this. Alex, morning to you. So, look, what's the proposal, and when can we expect to get more detail?
We're expecting more detail on it early next week, but Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, is pitch-rolling for this already. I think the idea is that by reducing the number of forces, there are costs that can be saved, money that can be saved on administration costs, that kind of thing. And as you said, Anna, free up police officers to do the jobs that people really want them to do, so tackling phone theft, antisocial behaviour, that kind of thing. So this is the government getting on the front foot, trying to really prioritise a domestic agenda, which has really been blown off course by global events since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and it's been talked about for a while, hasn't it? I mean, previous Home Secretaries have floated this kind of idea. Is it popular?
Well, Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Chief of Police Commissioner, he was saying that these reforms are long overdue. He was saying that actually this would be really good for local policing. So I think there is sort of tentative backing for this. I think the big question is, big reforms like this are, they're time-consuming, they could be quite distracting. It's whether they really get off the ground. And of the few details that we've got, these mergers might not really be completed until the mid-2030s.
Wow.
So it's one of those cases of maybe a great idea in principle, but can it really happen in practice? I think that's the big question.
Yeah, one to definitely watch. And more details, as you say, early next week. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you for that, Alex. All right, let's take a look at the weather then.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, it's going to turn colder over the weekend, but the unsettled theme looks to continue with localised flooding and disruption in the northeast and southwest today. The Portuguese named storm Ingrid will take rain across southern Britain and the south of Ireland this morning, turning showery for some later. Further north, it'll be drier overall, with any early fog lifting, but eastern Scotland will have outbreaks of rain and hill snow. It'll turn windier with coastal gales in the northeast. The afternoon will bring further showers or longer spells of rain, with thundery downpours possible in the southwest.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, Jackie has joined us because coming up in a little while we're going to speak to a former Olympic cyclist. As we said to you, was it last hour, the NHS have got a plan in place to try and save money by getting more people on their bikes. Jackie, we're going to buy you a bike so you can help out.
Oh, excellent. I'm on board for that.
Excellent stuff.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety as Russian drones will be trying to find this position. We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming. I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful. With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. This is routine training for NATO. But should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real. Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans. The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Let's just bring you more reaction to Donald Trump's comments overnight, where he claimed that NATO troops had stayed a little off the front lines in Afghanistan. It's prompted quite a response. People here not at all happy about that. And we've just heard from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, who has said Trump saying NATO allies weren't on the front line in Afghanistan is flat-out nonsense. She says British, Canadian and NATO troops fought and died alongside the US for 20 years. This is a fact, not opinion. Their sacrifice deserves respect, not denigration.
Yeah,
so
pretty strong words there.
Yeah, adding her voice too.
We'll hear, I'm sure, from the Prime Minister when asked about this later on today. We heard from Stephen Kinnock, the Health Minister, earlier, who said, you know, that he just doesn't understand what Donald Trump was thinking by saying this. He agrees, of course, that it is flat out wrong, which it is. It's a fact that NATO troops fought and died alongside the Americans in Afghanistan. Some 850 soldiers from 19 non-US nations died fighting there. At least 450 British soldiers died and Danish soldiers died in high numbers as well. The highest capita deaths of any Allied force were the Danes, who died after answering the call of the Americans who attacked on September the 11th, that first time and only time that Article 5 has been invoked and used. So Donald Trump saying that, as politicians have been saying, is wrong. And there's also lots of upset from the families of people who have lost people.
Themselves, absolutely, who've witnessed the sacrifice of their colleagues. So we'll get plenty more reaction, no doubt, to the story throughout the day. But we're going to turn our attention to sport now. Jackie's going to join us for this as well, because we're talking about cyclists who are pushing the government to invest in facilities to help more people get out onto their bikes.
Yeah, the first phase of the scheme reportedly saved the NHS over £13 million, and they want this next phase to save a whole lot more.
They want the government to invest, don't they? They want £30 million invested in this second phase of their plan. It's called Places to Ride programme, and it was Britain's largest ever investment in community cycling facilities, first time round, launched in 2019, and helped fund, I think it's 150 community cycling projects. So they want more of that money. And we've been asking people how they feel about investing money in cycling.
Thank you very much for doing that. You've had a few people get in touch about sort of the cycling, where they are, the provision available. As I was complaining, I often find that cycle lanes where I am end up nowhere. It's very difficult to get on the cycle lane, despite the fact that I live in London and probably has lots of provision for cycle lanes. So look, we've had Colin get in touch with his thoughts about this. He says that cyclists want £30 million. Fine, but how about a £25 a year licence fee for every bike on the road? Colin thinks all cyclists would argue against that. Not sure you're exactly right with that, Colin, because there are some voluntary licence fees, aren't there, for cyclists on the road. And the idea about having a licence for a cyclist is, of course, that then the cyclists can be registered and they know where the bike belongs to and who it belongs to. So if there's any indiscretions by cyclists up and down on the road, that there is some kind of recompense, some kind of comeback.
Yeah, and a long, quite thoughtful email as well from Ian Lyons, who's an ultra-distance cyclist. So, Ian, apologies for me paraphrasing, but he talks about how he cycles more than 10,000 miles a year in the UK and abroad. So, obviously, really interesting reflections from him. He says he spends a lot of time riding on rural roads, commuting corridors and long-distance routes. So he sees firsthand, he says, where the conflicts come from and how they can be avoided. Essentially, he's talking about one of the worst problems, not being the behaviour of cyclists, but about poor road design. He says in the UK, bikes and cars are often forced to share the same narrow strip of tarmac. That creates frustration and risk. And he says that in Spain, lots of the roads have proper hard shoulders, and those aren't painted cycle lanes that disappear at junctions, but they're wide continuous margins that separate bikes. He does go on, but that's sort of one of his thoughts.
It's all about provision, and just similar thought as well. The last one we're going to go through here, Dave from Birmingham, says that he drives endlessly past empty bus lanes. He says it should make more sense to resurface the roads and make sure there are no potholes to make it safer for all road users, including cyclists. So look, people have lots of feelings and thoughts about this.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Keep them coming in, but we want to put some of those issues, don't we, to former Olympic cyclist and managing director of the British Cycling Foundation, Ed Clancy, who joins us now. Really good to have you on, especially someone so well decorated in cycling as you. And tell us a little bit, first of all, about this push for more funding to get people on their bikes and get out there.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. So, I mean, globally, I mean, you're speaking to an ex-Olympian. You obviously think cycling's the best sport in the world, but we've already touched on it's a great way of commuting. It's a great utility tool. It's a great way for leisure to improve your mental health and well-being. And you know, the bike is so much more than the best sport in the world. And in terms of the specifics of this programme, so looking back a few years, in 2019, there was £15 million invested by the government. And, you know, you've already touched on the fact that there's a lot of calls on funding pots at the moment. But the great news is that it was a massive success. And in terms of a return on investment, for every pound that was invested in that, it returned £6.5 of social return, and that'll be divvied up into multiple things, embedding healthy habits early on in kids, reducing the burden on the NHS, giving people the ability, the capability, the opportunity to learn how to ride a bike. So when they are in transport deserts where public transport's not great, you know, a lot of underserved communities don't have access to cars and they won't have access to cars. You know, if we can provide spaces that are safe and accessible for people, particularly children, to learn how to ride bikes, then, you know, they'll always have this humble tool that they can use to get to education, jobs and opportunities. And for what it's worth, maybe I'm biased, but I think that's a good thing.
Ed, I think you might be a little bit biased. It's Jackie here, who does the sport. You say that it saved the NHS 30 billion. Is that because a lot of people who get involved in cycling, a bit like golfers, become slightly obsessed with it, and they're so healthy then for the rest of their lives, and it's saving on lots of things. But how do you quantify what it's saving?
Yeah, I only know some high-level stats, and so with that £15 million that was invested 5 years ago, there's already been a £13.1 million return on reducing the burden on the NHS over a 5-year time horizon. Now, you've got to assume that that will continue for many, many years and many, many decades to come. And, you know, interestingly enough, before I was brought onto air, there was a little bit of chat about bike lanes and cycle lanes. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a lag time. That's a fact, you know. Sometimes you can build cycle lanes and it'll take years and years and even decades before they reach full capacity. But I do work in the Combined Authority in South Yorkshire, and I know the return on investment from road schemes, and I know the return on investment from some cycle schemes. And, you know, very broadly speaking, it's about a 1-to-1 ratio for the amount of money it costs to build new roads and the amount of social return you get from accessing jobs and opportunities and so on. Bike lanes are typically 1-to-4 to 1-to-20. So whilst it's not necessarily instant gratification, people like me argue that it's money well spent.
And you're suggesting we're going to get there as well, is what you're saying as well. Like the commitment is there to make sure there's more provision. We do appreciate you joining us this morning, Ed. Thank you very much for your time. And I think it's also important to say, like, getting out on your bike doesn't mean dressing up in lycra and being a super serious cyclist. Just getting out on your bike in any form with your helmet on, make sure, is really important.
Yeah, and choosing that as your kind of default mode of transport, if it's practical.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Good to hear from Ed Clancy. He's one of our most decorated Olympians.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What a guy.
So many medals.
What
I
a
need
guy.
to get a bike.
You do? Well, I think I promised to buy you one, didn't I? I don't know why I said that.
Don't know why.
It's my fever.
So
yeah, you did. I heard it. Tell us about the rest of the sport, Jackie.
Yeah, we should talk about Gianni Infantino, because he's upset a lot of people at Davos, talking about, defending the World Cup coming up in America, Canada, Mexico. You know, there's talk about problems with visas. There's talk about the very high ticket prices, that, you know, 3 times higher than Qatar. He then said, well, Qatar turned out all right, and even this happened.
We had virtually no incidents. For the first time in history, also, no Brit was arrested during a World Cup. Imagine, this is something really, really special.
So some would say it's a playful dig. Some would say it was
playful,
a bit rude. Football Supporters Association replied, while we have Mr Infantino's attention, we would like to point out that rather than making cheap jokes about our fans, he should concentrate on making cheap tickets, which they are not.
No, they're not.
Last night,
go on.
Europa League, I know you don't want to see this because your team Forest played and had a bit of a disastrous...
It was a bad old game.
It was a dreadful game. It was extremely dull. But I'm going to show you the best bits. But they're very...
Not me, I'm not.
They're very bad bits if you happen to be a Forest fan. Let's have a quick look. So, 53rd minute, Forest won a penalty. Morgan Gibbs-White took it. It was saved by the Braga keeper. 54 seconds later, they went down the other end. And Ryan Yates scored an own goal. So 1-0 Braga. They had no shots on target in the whole match. There was a red card late on for dissent for Elliot Anderson. Also bad news. All in all, an absolutely dreadful night. It was better for Villa because Unai Emery knows how to win this competition. He's won it 4 times, and his Villa side have qualified for the next phase with a game to spare. So this is what happened. Jadon Sancho got his first goal for the club, and it was enough for victory over Fenerbahce in Turkey. It was Unai Emery's 100th game in the competition. But there was a shove at the end on Yuri Tielemans as he substituted him, and there was harsh words. And it was a bit like, oh, what's he done that for? But you had a theory it's because...
Yeah, apparently he was coming off the pitch too quickly.
Too quickly.
Yeah.
And we should mention Celtic as well held on for a real battling draw last night with against Bologna. Austin Trusty with the second goal after Rio Hatate had scored the first goal, then he got sent off, and then they had to really battle to hang on, but they did, and it could be a really valuable point because they are within the cut-off point for the playoffs. Rangers won last night. They are not within the cut-off point for the playoffs. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour
You did well there.
around Europe last night. But Gianni Infantino, my goodness.
I know. So he's in Qatar. His implication is that people weren't out having drinks and stuff, so there were no arrests made by the Qatari police.
Presumably that's what he meant.
Right, well done, Gianni. Hilarious.
Plenty of sport this weekend. You'll be back tomorrow, won't you?
Yes, I will be back tomorrow. Looking forward to Arsenal against United at the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a big one. See you then.
We'll
See you in the morning, and top stories coming up your way next.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Roger and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.